Welcome to the People's Guild.
Each week we explore the Splinterlands universe with guests from all across the mythical land of Praetorian.
Join us on our journey as we discuss the evolution of the game, the strategy, the lore, and the exciting path that lies ahead.
To support the People's Guild, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, and also check us out on PeakD, YouTube, and Twitter.
Send your questions, suggestions, and epic battles in our comments through Twitter or email at thepeoplesguildspl@gmail.com. We'll feature the best in our episodes and maybe airdrop you some prizes.
Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the People's Guild. Another week, another episode, another great guest. Bit of a hot topic going on around the Praetorian universe at the moment. We got the Jupiter proposal to bring in PJ and Co. for the completion of the Validator project. So we've got PJ on. I think this is a bit of a coming out party for PJ, if I'm not mistaken. We saw you on the down hall last week, and you're making the rounds with us here today. So welcome out of the shadows, PJ. It's good to have you. Good to host you. Good to meet you, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate you guys accommodating this too. Yeah, it feels like I don't get a whole lot of time in front of the community either. I've kind of been behind the scenes, so not a lot of people really know who I am, what I do. Actually, I was really surprised how many people didn't realize I was the CTO for Splinterlands, and they were asking who this guy was, and mostly because I'm behind the scenes a lot of time. I don't interact too much with the community, but we are terribly focused on what we're working on all the time. And as you guys know, it's been a pretty hot topic talking about validators, but it's a good opportunity too. I mean, at this point in time, Splinterlands has been going through a really rough patch like most of crypto. So it just kind of makes sense that I would come out and peek my head out and obviously take kind of a temperature of where everybody is and try to get some feedback too, which is always welcome on this side. But yeah, like I said, I don't interact too much. I'm not, I'm really not the most avid player of the game. I'm mostly focused on the technology side of it, right? A lot of the stuff that I focus on really is mostly around infrastructure, cost, and then maintaining the team behind the scenes and making sure that everybody's operating the way that they need to. We spend a lot of time prepping and planning. So we have, if most of the team members that are working on that stuff, they're a really hard-working group of individuals. And it's been a real pleasure working with them because I've made a lot of friends who are absolutely diehard about Splinterlands. All these people are actually pretty diehard about everything that goes on, and I get to kind of enjoy that part of it. I mean, I don't have to be affected by token prices or products, but more or less I get to have a clean head, and I don't make decisions based on my own financial gain or anything like that. So I really do enjoy it. And, it's really exciting. This is the first real big gaming company that I've worked at, but this is not the first experience I've had at scale at crypto by any means. In fact, I've spent a lot of time working in the crypto space for a long time, solving a lot of solutions for different aspects of the market. So this is a pleasure, and I absolutely love working at this company. It's been an absolute joy.
Awesome. Yeah, man. It's definitely, I remember hearing the name before or heard references to the, the CTO, but yeah, never knew who the actual person was. So it's good to have you on and, get to check you out and see, you're a big Wes Anderson fan. You got the Steve Zissou poster behind you. So, is Life Aquatic your favorite Wes Anderson movie? Is that like the one, or, how did you get started in that?
Yeah, most definitely. So I used to spend a ton of time traveling. My dad was an avid scuba diver. And it reminds me a lot of that Steve Zissou character because, he was a pot smoking hippie and we'd go out on boats and his whole motto was get high, go low, but he was really successful. And so when I saw this film, it was like, and I just connected the two and was like, I know this lifestyle. I know this type of individual who is rather crass and rough around the edges, but you absolutely adore them for their personality. And what you see is what you get. So yeah, and then we were talking about other films too, like Darjeeling Limited is another great Wes Anderson flick. The Royal Tenenbaums,
Rushmore. I love Rushmore.
Yeah, Rushmore.
That's the first one I saw, I guess, but I was just so blown away by it. Just
It's so funny, right?
Yeah.
And they're just battling it out
Yeah.
for the teacher, and it's just
Yeah.
like the whole premise behind it is just brilliant. And there's like some nostalgia that goes with it. You know what I mean? Like those films have like this kind of really weird nostalgic feeling to them. They've gotten more and more so over time, as you could tell. The scenery has gotten very, very colorful, and it's become more of like a playwright. But those original films, those are my comfort films. You know what I mean? If I'm feeling down, if I'm tired, I'll put on one of those films and I'll fall asleep real quick. You know what I mean? It just, I
Yeah.
know it really,
It is
and the music's
really
great, too.
interesting to see that, like with Rushmore, how and some of these, and like when you get into like Darlene Limited and Grand Budapest and the French Connection, where it's so much as like the scenery and the backdrop and these just like beautiful eclectic settings, but at the heart of it, it's still kind of that comedy from Rushmore where and that was just like shot basically like in a high school or college yard, it seemed like. So definitely a little, and even Royal Tenenbaums were a little rougher around the edges than some of the other stuff, but I definitely enjoyed those movies.
I always pop out a quick saying from those films, just kind of come to my head when I'm in conversations with people and I won't realize it. It's kind of like a slip, right? And then one of them was from the Darjeeling Limited when they're talking. He's like, "We haven't found us yet." And they're like, "What? Say that again." He's like, "We haven't found us yet." Right? And so
that's such an iconic scene, man.
Yeah, right. It's a great one, but
yeah, I can never be around anyone in like a nurse's or doctor's uniform and then from the Rushmore be like, these are OR scrubs. Oh, are they?
Are they?
Like that just always pops into my head, and I start like giggling to myself. Like it's so funny.
Yeah, that's a classic one right there. And I'll say that script I'll say it out loud and nobody will know what I'm talking about too. And I'm just cracking up. I'm like, are those OR scrubs? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, are they? And they're like, who are you? Like, what? Yeah, if they don't get it, they don't get it, obviously. But yeah, I just have to say, like, there's a real joy and passion now becoming a Wes Anderson fan. I have a ton of his stuff, and it's really cool because you get to watch the progression of somebody who's in the industry. Like you can actually see their style progress, and it becomes more and more beautiful, but also becomes a little bit more mainstream in a sense too. And so, it's like it doesn't ruin it or anything. The Moonrise Kingdom was another like really classic one that started to take off, and that was like, really another just like beautiful video, movie that was put together. The scripting, everything on it was just phenomenal. And then from there, you really start to see the progression of the films that he makes. But yeah, it's absolutely lovely.
Fantastic, Mr. Fox, another classic.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one. That's one I don't think I've seen.
Oh man!
Oh, that's awesome. The Isle of Dogs is another one.
Yeah, because I've seen Isle of Dogs. I've
great.
definitely seen that, but I need to go. Yeah, because I'm looking at the list here, and I'm like, oh, I've seen pretty much all these, but for some reason haven't seen. I don't know how I missed that one, or maybe I don't think I've seen that one. I'm gonna check it out.
It's good. Oh God, what's the
Baggies, Buns, and Beans?
Yeah.
What are the three farmers?
I was trying. What's his name is the narrator for it too, and it plays the fox. That really iconic voice. I forget what his name is. I'm terrible with names, by the way.
Is it George Clooney?
Yeah, it's George Clooney. That's right.
Okay,
That's right. George Clooney.
Yeah.
So, and he always pulls these like A-list actors in there. You're like, what the heck? Like this is like
for really like cameo size roles, right? Like it really amazes me his ability to and the fact that he gets Bill Murray, works him in no matter the script, he finds a perfectly appropriate spot for the legend that is Bill Murray.
I know, and to be honest, like some of Bill Murray, like those, it's almost like they were made for him, but they weren't. You know what I mean? He just plays that character so well and does it with like such like fluidity. You know what I mean? It's so natural that it I don't know how to describe it. Like it's just a whole nother level of film that makes film really enjoyable. You know what I mean? And
totally.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, I think the witty asshole with kind of a soft heart, it feels like that is Bill Murray. So it is kind of appropriate that he fits those roles like a glove.
Yeah. So yeah, and when it comes to that kind of stuff, I know I'm kind of detracting from the Splinterlands talk, but there's a lot of culture in this stuff too, and it's really interesting too because I find more people in Web3 and kind of in the Splinterlands community and people that we talk to, you know, they know who that is, the character, not that it's Bill Murray, you know what I mean? But they actually know, like, oh, that's Steve Zissou. It's like when you called it all on the wall. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, like these guys know what's up. You know, these guys know Wes Anderson films, right? So
Yeah,
it's
I
awesome.
remember watching Rushmore when I was probably like in high school at the time, or just yeah, I would have been in high school and like really liking that and liking the World Tenenbaums and like going back and then going back and like renting Bottle Rocket at like a
Yeah.
Blockbuster video or something and checking that out and really liking that and just seeing that was like because that is just I'm gonna watch that again soon. Now that we're talking about it, like, is that movie's just like so crazy. It's like so much going on, and you're just like, what is happening? So I definitely want to go back. When's the last time you guys watched Bottle Rocket? Definitely go back and
So
watch it.
Bottle Rocket's like the first one he made, right? That was his
Yeah,
first feature film. It's been years, but it's a great one too. And
yeah.
isn't it Owen Wilson in that one, or
Owen Wilson
no?
and Luke Wilson, I think,
Both
Yeah,
right?
of
and Luke
them.
Wilson.
Two
Yeah, both of
brothers.
Yeah,
them.
the
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
twin
brothers.
brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. I'll have to go check it out. Like I said, those are my comfort films. You know, depending on how this conversation goes, I might be putting that on and trying to cry myself to sleep. You know what I
Oh
mean? We'll see.
man.
Nice.
Get
Yeah, I think the Wilson brothers and Wes Anderson are like childhood buddies, if I'm not mistaken. I
That
think they all kind
makes
of grew up
sense.
together, and yeah.
what is
Owen Wilson is another one that always makes it into Wes Anderson's films in one way or another.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and you just see those key people that just keep popping up and they're not like famous, but these are big roles for them, you know what I mean, too. The Wilson brothers are obviously super famous, but
Yeah.
you know, like you know, you just see
Willem
key
Dafoe, I
characters
think, is
come.
my
Yeah.
is my favorite recurring
Mm,
guy. He was so good in
yeah.
Grand Budapest.
Yeah, really good, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such an
Yeah.
amazing role. But yeah, you know, I guess that's kind of like one of the things that's really beautiful and kind of great about you know, the arts and stuff is really kind of the impact it has. But I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but it does make great conversation. It does put smiles on people's faces, you know. So, you know,
Yeah, no, that's
We
what we're
cover it
all
all here,
about.
PJ. No
Yeah.
conversations unwelcome.
okay.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
all right.
We're not just here, you know, we're kind of like trying to take the angle that, you know, we want people to kind of get to know the people behind the scenes, you know, and get to know, and that's you know, that's such a great I think, yeah, when you know, look at someone and hear someone, oh yeah, he's a big Wes Anderson guy. I think that's that's definitely a great way to vouch for yourself. So at least in my book. So
I'm a human being, you know.
yeah, yeah. So
So,
it's always good to get to know people. We're not just handles on Discord. So and hopefully bring a little humanity to the to the
conversation.
chats.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, most definitely.
we talked about dancing around the crypto thing. You know, how did you kind of get into crypto? And you know, we were talking about some of your, you know, your background, your employment background. So I'd love to hear, you know, like how you got into crypto and how that kind of, you know, the path that you kind of went down to get to
Oh, yeah.
Splinterlands. So
Yeah, so originally like early crypto, right? So I started off like my professional career, college dropout, went in as like a call center agent, became a call center guy for a mortgage company when I was like 19 years old, right? I mean, I would sit in my closet and make phone calls all day long, so my parents didn't have to hear me. And then I became a loan officer because I saw how much my friend was making. And then I learned how to become a broker. So by the time I was 21, I had my own brokerage. And then by the time I was 25, I was doing lending, and later became like a wholesale lender on the secondary mortgage market at a really young age, right? And I have a consumer finance lending license. And then I just kind of figured all this stuff out because it was like easier than going to school because I could just go and buy a book and learn how they did it and then copy what they did and just apply it to my business, right? But then the housing crisis came through and knocked me out, and a lot of other things had happened in my life that were really kind of just not good. So I learned how to program. I taught myself how to program, and I just bought a bunch of books, sat at home for like 2 years, practicing on my career. And I remember at the time when the economy was collapsing, people were talking about like this currency called Amero, which was supposed to be like the American dollar. It's like the North American version of the dollar used for trade and all these other things. And then Max Kaiser was on all the time talking about Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Those like the good old Max Kaiser days, right? When he'd be on RT and just talking about it, and the price was super cheap. And I was like, oh yeah, it seems kind of cool. I didn't know too much about it. I was still kind of grinding my teeth, trying to figure out how to become a better programmer. Got a couple jobs doing like, you know, a lot of localized programming, went to work for a small energy company, and then just progressively kind of built up my career. and then started and financed the company. Did my first round of seed investment, brought just in under like $1 million to build out software for a production company out in Tennessee called WorksFire, and they ended up just kind of taking over that whole project internally. And I went to work out in Hollywood working for a company called Wildlife. And then after like 6 months at Wildlife, I got offered a job as CTO at a company called Speaker. And Speaker was like the real first big company I worked at, and or that I took over basically the management of. And this was a massive company. We were doing like 60 million a year in revenue. We were partnered with Creative Artists, CAA, Condé Nast, Time Inc., Google, Microsoft. And what it was a massive influencer platform. It was the world's largest influencer marketplace at the time. We managed 250,000 different influencers. And then my job particularly was to build that platform, the analytics platform. But I built software that actually aggregated pretty much the whole entire population of the United States social profiles every single day, right?
Wow.
That would be considered probably like illegal today. But this stuff was so crazy, and we were so good at what we did. If you guys remember back in 2016, there was a company called Cambridge Analytica that got in trouble, right? We were like we were pulling like 5 times as much data as Cambridge Analytica. Like this was a massive operation, right? So we not only pulled your whole profile, we pulled all your images, all your comments, everything that you liked, and we would run it through this big engine that would basically tell us like, are you a person that has multiple children? Do you take pictures outside? Do you hold Coca-Cola bottles in your photos? You know, do you like right-wing posts? Do you like left-wing posts, right? And we saw all this crazy stuff kind of happening with politics at the time. And it was like really nuts because we were starting to graph out all of these relationships. And this plays a really important part into how I got into crypto because these are social networks, right? And so we use graph data a lot to express and to extract information about relationships and how information is basically shared throughout a network and how connections, there's a law called Metcalfe's law that's followed in this, network valuation, right? And so we would look at, kind of how the growth of networks or the growth of topics was easy to help us develop campaigns that would make brands blow up, right? So like really have viral campaigns using influencers. And we got to a point where like you could say, hey, we wanted to spend $250,000 on a single post on Instagram with Kim Kardashian. And we would come back and say, hey, with these 45 influencers, you could hit that same audience 45 times and have a much greater propensity for the same amount of money, right? And so that's the idea behind it, is these brands were looking for ways to really navigate, kind of the social sphere, because this is all new. This is all relatively new technology, relatively new information and data and advertising, right? And Speaker was the name of the company, and it was really far ahead of itself at the time. But I also kind of saw the writing on the wall because I knew that we were aggregating so much data that there was going to be a lot of downfall for this. And we were seeing things that were also like really unpleasant at the time. And I'll give you kind of just, word of advice here. Like what we saw was really nuts, especially around election time. Like if you go, like the average person, checks Facebook like 2 or 3 times throughout the day. And then when they're about to fall asleep, right? It's the first thing you check when you wake up. You go to the restroom a couple times throughout the day and you're checking it. And then, at night around 11 o'clock, you'll probably check it real quick, fall asleep, do whatever, right? If you post something, then you're likely to spend upwards of an hour on Facebook because now you're going to see notifications come in, check to see how people are responding to that post, if they like it, if they don't like it, if they write comments, you'll write back, and then you'll do this throughout the day, right? But if you see a political post that you don't like, on average, people spend like 8 hours a day in political arguments. And it's not just you, it's your whole family, and it's all your friends that are watching it happen and unfold. So all of a sudden we noticed that like a lot of people were seeing stuff that they hated as like the first thing they see in the morning when they wake up. And so I'm sure we all had friends and family that were pissed off at each other during the election cycle, right? And I call it kind of the campaign of dissent, right? And that's kind of how advertising's been since then, is that, it's easier to piss people off and motivate them to spend money on things and to spend time on social networks. And it sells a lot more. And I hated that. Like I absolutely hated that about influence. So I always have these like memento sayings that I take with me that I kind of learned throughout being in the influence sphere so much, which is, it doesn't matter if I'm wrong. It doesn't matter if I'm right. Just how many people believe me. Right. And then the other one was, the world is what you make of it for the most part. So people have their own outlooks on things, and Facebook will further prove that outlook that you have by just feeding you information regarding those topics. And it's really just meant to, what you don't realize is it's kind of crafting this reality around you that's not real. And a lot of people become diehard about it. And we saw this all happen. We saw all this unfold. And so around 2016, I started looking at crypto, and I was like, I like finance. I like engineering. Like, this is a perfect intersection of things. And I had some friends that were really, really, really early Bitcoin people who had made, hundreds of millions of dollars in crypto, right? Like really big players in the game that were working with me on projects. And I just became very fascinated with it. So what I started doing early on, netted me, I made a huge amount of money doing it too, was I started graphing out blockchains the same way that we graphed out social networks. And you can actually see a lot of my early work. We've posted all of this stuff. It's some of the most beautiful crypto analytics you've ever seen. In fact, I've never seen anybody do it as good as we did back in the day. And if you guys, I'd love to share some of that stuff here, but if you go to medium.com/FRST, you'll see some of the charts that we built, but I'll just kind of break it down for you real quick. And there are videos too that show you these three-dimensional models of exchanges and transactions. I kid you not, it is like some of the most beautiful crypto analytics that you'll ever see. And this is all from like 2016, 2017, 2018, right? So what happened was, this is kind of a really interesting story, and you guys will probably appreciate this. So when you start graphing out blockchains, what you realize is they're social networks of value, right? People only interact with objects or people that they have some type of relationship with, right? And by looking at all of this stuff, it's FRST, like first, but without the I. So if you go to FRST, yeah, it stands for Financial Resources, Statistics, and Technologies is the acronym. But we always joke them at front running slower traders. Yeah, if you see the charts, there's a video in there called like finding and following the most performant wallets on Ethereum, and other ones like how do you spot hedge funds and funds. And there's videos on there, and if you watch those videos, they're just absolutely amazing. And again, like I said, I've never seen anybody make videos or analytics to the extent that we did. It's beautiful stuff. So anyways, like when you start graphing out these wallets, what you start seeing is transaction patterns, right? And you can personify transaction patterns. So were either of you guys like really early investors in ICOs?
I was not. No, not back in the day when those were super big,
Yeah, so ICOs, I mean, we know what they are though, right? They're initial coin offerings, right? And like the idea behind ICOs is to like get in early and sell out fast, right?
Yeah.
So what I started doing was I created a heuristic, which was really simple. I wanted to personify what venture capital looked like. So what you look at is, if you look at the ICO wallets, you can see all of the early interactors with those wallets, and 90% of them are going to be team members. 10% of them are going to be venture capital wallets. And you can tell the difference because team members only have one kind of token in their wallet, and venture capital has a lot of them, right? And venture capital is always, you could see it had multiple transactions with early contracts, right? So I have this kind of crazy story where I found all of the venture capital wallets on Ethereum by doing that, right? And then I went and bought a copy of Crunchbase's database, and I looked at all of the investors that had invested in the ICOs that I was looking at. And I found the investors' wallets by matching their investments to the token holdings of the wallets. So I knew exactly who was investing in what. And what's even crazier is because I was working on all of this Facebook data at the time, I found the investors. I found out what group that we were talking in on Facebook, and I went into that group and started sharing stuff with them, and I could see them following all of my transactions, right? So I knew what I was doing was working. So like I had an impact on the market by doing that. And so I picked one really good method. So like, I'll give you an idea of how the psychology behind this works, and it'll make a lot of sense to you guys. If I told you I know who the best trader is in the world and what token he's buying today, what are you going to do?
Go buy that token, right?
Exactly. It's what we do with Nancy Pelosi, right? She picks a stock and it's like insider trading, right? Okay. So the idea behind the business was, how much would you pay us to know what these people are buying before we share that information with 100,000 people, right? Because it's an obvious curve, right? And so this is where influence, I always say influence is really just finance, right? Finance is really just influence, right? So you have these influential actors that could steer a market. And as long as you're the first person to recognize it, then that's kind of why we came up with the name FIRST for the business. It's FRST, it stands for first, right? So that was the idea behind the business. And then we started doing this for all different types of methodologies. And in that video, in one of those videos, I talk about how I took like, you guys remember EOS, right? That's kind of Dan Larimer's other project before or after Steemit, right? He came on, did EOS with Brock Pierce and all of them. So I found the market maker for EOS. It's a guy out of Taiwan, huge investor. He's like the largest landholder in Taiwan. And I found his fund wallet, and they were buying like 2,000 worth of EOS token, 2,000 ETH worth of EOS tokens a day, and making the market. They were splitting it between Bitfinex, Binance, and a couple other exchanges like BitBull, and I think Poloniex is another one. There's a couple different exchanges, and so it was easy for me to see who was committing token arbitrage. So they would buy tokens from the contract. The Dutch style auction would end at the end of the day, and then they would sell their tokens, right? And so I would play the inverse of that and basically front run all of their positions all day long because I knew exactly how much they were going to buy when they were going to buy. And then eventually the EOS token price fell to like 48.5 cents. And I bought like 15 grand worth of tokens at 48.5 cents. And like 90 days later, it was at like 22.50 or $24 or something like that. It just absolutely took off. So I took all of that money that I made from that single trade, started an analytics company around this stuff. And then, we had Vestigo Ventures was like one of our lead funders. The CME put money into our company. We had some of the greatest, some of the biggest funds in the world I got to work with, and I got to go into their offices and work with the quants at all of these amazing like high frequency trading firms. And, there's me dressed like this showing up to their office and they're like, who is this clown? You know what I mean? But, I'm there teaching them all of these things and they're just completely like, how did you figure this out? Like, this is absolutely nuts, right? Like, this is absolutely crazy. And we got so good at what we were doing that we could spot insider trading, basically. And so our company acted as an expert witness to the SEC. And what we found out was because of where the trading was occurring, because we would look at like how often the wallets would transact, so we could see what time zone the wallets were active, so we could kind of guess where in the world they were, right? Plus, we had nodes all over the Ethereum network, basically at every edge that Amazon and Google would let us put nodes up in, listing the transactions, so we could somewhat triangulate where the transactions are coming from, where they're first being broadcast on the network. And then we would just find these and identify different types of things, whether, like I said, we were expert witness seeing all this stuff, right? And we would actually have all this information in the mempool. So we were doing all the data parsing, figuring out the prices of the tokens, and figuring out what contract is what tokens being transferred, right? What they basically came back with is it's all public data. So even though it's insider trading, you could still trade on it all day long, right? So we made models around that kind of stuff. And then we would look at exchange inflows and outflows and identify fund schedules for depositing funds or withdrawing funds. And, you could make a market based on a certain fund withdrawing, if they're going to pull out $10 million, it's definitely going to move the market. So, we would see their deposits come in and basically try to get in front of them. And then this is kind of like around the time where Uniswap started becoming a thing, right? But anyways, none of that actually worked out in my favor. I actually had to shut down the company, and then we rolled into the COVID territory, and it became almost impossible to raise money at that point in time. Like, there was nobody really doing anything, and crypto went into absolute free fall there for a minute. I think ETH went all the way down to like $158 or something like that, like just completely crashed, right? So I had a moratorium on trading. I wasn't allowed to trade after that. So then I went into energy and absolutely hated it. It was it's the most stressful job ever because the portfolio had gone from 90% commercial to flipping to 90% residential, and we were trying not to burn up power lines and trying to keep hospitals open and cities from overheating. It just happened to be like 2 of the hottest years on record too. So every home is running its air conditioning unit, and we're pulling in petabytes of meter data, but we're using all the skills that we got from learning high frequency trading. It's like the whole same team came over and worked with me on this stuff.
Okay, yeah. So is this another company you started up, or did you go work for?
No, I had to shut down FRST because that software was used by other funds, and their idea behind it was we're just going to use this, and we don't want anybody to know what's happening. You know what I mean? I mean, they were investors in the company, and so it became very hard to sell a product like that at the cost, right? So every day the chain gets larger, the more cost you have recurring, right? And so, we were spending upwards of like $700,000 on giant Elasticsearch clusters, just the egress of all the systems, maintaining like high frequency trading desks have very, very strict SLAs that you have to follow, else they basically come down on you really hard. I mean, we had great investors, but it made more money for them to just do it themselves than to try to create a service that you could sell to everybody. And there's a major conflict of interest. So like the conflict of interest really comes down to this thing that we discovered when we were doing influence, which is the correlation of propensity behind who is talking about a subject and how it's going to last as far as a topic that people talk about. Well, it's kind of crazy because influence, like crypto markets are heavily based on influence. You know what I mean? You could have somebody who's really influential just go out and say, hey, I'm launching my own coin, and they'll raise like, tens of millions of dollars and rug pull the whole entire market, right? But people don't care because they're like, if I'm in early enough, I'm not going to be one of the suckers, right? But there's a very common reoccurring cycle to influential campaigns that correlates directly to asset prices. And it has nothing to do with finance, but this is one of the things that I've written a lot about this. There's a term from George Soros called reflexivity, which is, these markets are basically like self-fulfilling prophecies, right? And when you look at how influence kind of dictates the narrative behind these, the pattern that we look for is called the ADSR envelope. And you can look this up. It stands for attack, decay, sustain, release. And it has nothing to do with marketing, influence, or finance. It's strictly something that's used in audio synthesis, but the pattern for it is exactly the same. And so if you go back to like Bitcoin prices back in 2017, you look at the price chart, you see it has this attack curve and then a decay, and then it sustains and then it releases after a while. Well, these are, those parabolic influential events will always dictate prices pretty much in the same way. So you can kind of guess when you're going to hit the top of the market. You can also guess when you're stuck in this sustain region of prices, right? And then you have the release, right? And then token prices that aren't based off of that have two other correlating patterns, but they're very normal. You just have your regular pump and dump, right? And then you have your long burn where it just keeps getting lower and lower and lower because of stagnation, basically. Like economic stagnation is the biggest one in crypto, where you just don't have general interest, volume starts to fall, there's less and less arbitrage opportunity, and the market just becomes very heavy, very dense, and that always has a downward force on price, right? So like, again, didn't go to college for any of this stuff, just kind of figured it out through experience and became a polymath and just kind of used all my skills to put this stuff together. But FRST was actually a speaker at the World Economic Forum, right? I was the founder of the company. World's largest funds. I don't need to name too many of them, but you can look it up. Like, these are $1 trillion funds basically were investing in this technology because they wanted to get ahead of crypto. And besides that, like, I've done a shit ton of work, and sorry for the language, but
that's quite all right.
Okay. Lending and debt, right? So real world assets, collateralization programs, Uniswap v3. I've taught classes on Uniswap v3. I actually teach a class at the University of California, Irvine next Thursday at the Paul Mirage School of Business about market making and how to make markets, right? And so what's crazy is I don't really get to like flex a lot of this at Splinterlands, but behind the scenes, I know exactly what's causing a lot of the issues, and there's a lot of things that we can do to make things better in this ecosystem. But I will be very vocal about the fact that we are still working on things that were started before I even came to this company, right? So we're at this point now where we're still like, we're just finishing these projects that have dragged on for years, and validators is one of them, right? But the problem is they kept stacking more and more stuff on, like Aggie's a great salesperson. You give Aggie an audience, he's going to go out there and just sell, right? And if there's nothing for him to sell, he'll make something up and start selling it. You know what I mean? And so that was kind of the problem, is that we could never really catch up with a lot of the stuff that was happening behind the scenes, and it creates a lot of technical debt that you have to kind of maintain. So we call it paying sins of the father, right? But love him. As much as I love Aggie, we're still working on some of his projects, and that's, validators is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
But again, like I couldn't think of more for the job that he's given me and the opportunity, because I absolutely love it. And, you know,
Well,
I
so
always look at this.
yeah, just let's back it up, run back a little bit. So you're getting out of the, you know, sick of trying to deal with the sorry, I derailed you on this a little bit. Sick of trying to deal with the power company stuff. So, you know, then where'd you go from there? And how'd you get to, you know, did you meet Aggie somewhere? You're starting to get back in you can't be trade crypto, so you said, well, I want to go, you know,
I,
get into a Web3 game area,
I had
or
I had a phone call. So I was starting a Web3 community called Crypto Monks, which is still out there actually. They maintain a lot of the money in their DAO. And at the time, I was heading down to NFTLA, and an investor buddy of mine named Jeremy called me, and he's like, "Hey, you know, what do you know about NFTs?" And I'm like, "You know, I've launched like 70 different NFT contracts for friends and for different companies, and like I said, I was doing a lot of real world asset stuff with NFTs early on." And he's like, "Hey, I got this guy you need to meet. His name's Richard, Hardpoint. And you know, he's having a really hard time with their engineering team right now. It's a very expensive operation. I think there might be some room for you to come and help." And so I sat down with Richard, absolutely, you know, love what he was talking about. You know, he's just got such a great appeal to him, right? You know, I was like, dude, I really like this guy. I think he's solid. He's got some serious problems with the engineering that me and my team could fix real quick, right? And so it's crazy. Like if you're looking at our AWS costs, when I started, Splinterlands was like, you know, 550 grand a month in servers, and like when you see the week that we started, it just plummets to like 75,000. It just keeps getting lower and lower and lower. And he was just like, man, you're doing a great job. You know, like obviously you're saving the company a ton of money. You know, I was VP of engineering at the time. He gave me some more slack to kind of take over how we manage projects and how we manage product behind the scene. Like we kicked off a whole agile training, and we started teaching agile throughout the organization, teaching people how to become kind of like self-project management experts in a sense. Everybody learned how to use Jira, for example, was another big one. And we started migrating everybody to smaller teams with kind of like, you know, more focus on like the upfront project planning, and then going through and making sure everything was spelled out. And then we also have like a lot of the team was heavily distributed at that point in time too. We had people all over the place. And I was having a hard time kind of connecting with a lot of them initially because I wasn't, like I said, I thought it was really important to kind of not be a major asset holder in the game because I would have a bias. And I could see the bias between people who were strictly there for engineering and then people who were there because they were at one point millionaires in the game. You know what I mean? So the I didn't want it to affect the decisions. Like I have kind of this addictive personality anyways, and I was already so heavy into crypto. Um, you know, I was, you know, thinking of all these things that could be done to improve asset prices, to improve products. I just kind of took a step back and said, look, like my core function here and my MO needs to be on finishing projects and cutting costs in engineering and infrastructure, right? Because it is a terribly expensive operation to run back in 2022, late 2022, right? And so then we started seeing kind of, you know, after FTX fell out and the bottom fell out of FTX, it became very stressful. Aggie asked me, you know, and Richard had asked me if I wanted to take over as CTO because I was, you know, I knew kind of the technology side of it was an easy solution. I had solutions to a lot of the problems and we could keep cutting costs on that end. So at the end of 2022, they asked me to take over as CTO. We did kind of an announcement in the DAO, but I really didn't want to be affected by any of the sentiment that was coming from the community and put, you know, my focus on having to answer questions because we had a customer service team that was already set up for that, customer support. So I just kind of stayed out of this one and decided, hey, I'm just gonna, you know, strictly unbiased have an approach here where I'm looking at what we have to do, setting up our timeline, setting up our budgets for everything else, and just kind of focused on making sure that we could start knocking stuff out. And so, you know, we consider it kind of like a quiet period for the most part, but everybody behind the scenes, you know, they're putting out stable. I don't know if you guys remember, but the game used to crash all the time back in 2022, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we went like almost a whole entire year with like no crashes whatsoever, right? Like everything just smoothed out, right? And then they started making, you know, policies around bots and stuff. And, you know, I kind of like the botting ecosystem, to be honest, because it increases volumes. And like, I think that there's gameplay that we could create that would, instead of like, Splinterlands, if it had a certain format that allowed people to go haywire with bots, then, it'd be a possible way for us to make revenue too, is by selling bots and by selling access to APIs for that type of stuff. So like all these ideas come out, but I'm not, I don't have to force them. I don't have to push them because, again, I'd rather just listen than try to dictate. And I feel like if people are really heavily invested, they're going to more dictate than listen. So that was my position all along. And then, yeah, that's how we kind of landed here. We're at a point now where it's like, there's some big projects that are getting wrapped up. We decided that I would take kind of a little bit more vocal approach on like the market side. And I talked to Clay behind the scenes a lot. Because now I'm at a point where I'm looking at our asset prices, looking at the number of cards that we have out on the market. You guys don't get to see it, but I have this really beautiful dashboard that gives me like all the statistics about everything, asset prices, number of assets, number of transactions, all that stuff that's going on. And I can directly correlate, cause and effect on this dashboard, which allows me to see, when a DAO proposal goes up and when we implement it, what the impact is on the ecosystem, right? So, I think that there's, believe it or not, there's like a lot of really low-hanging fruit out there for Splinterlands, and a lot of it's really easy to do, and we're starting to see some of this stuff kind of like rear its head up now, and people are starting to notice. And I love the way Matt approaches this stuff, because Matt has this like very how do I say it, like he's just a nice guy, right? So like when you're talking to him, and you can piss him off pretty easily, right? And he'll kind of respond to it, but he's not going to get angry. He's not going to take it out on you or nothing. You could just kind of tell, because his face will get flushed. But all of a sudden, he starts looking at stuff from a lot more analytical perspective, and he's very calculated in the way that he does things. So like you'll notice a big difference between like the number of token sales we have compared to when Aggie was CEO, right? Like Aggie, we were doing stuff all the time. It was like multi-million-dollar sales, right? Matt really wants to try to test things and figure out if it's actually working. Like with the last card sale, giving half of it back to the DAO, was a really good proposition, because now you're seeding and you're making the DAO somewhat of value and of relevancy again, right? And so we have to figure these things out, and that's kind of like where we're in this phase right now, which is really great. But it just becomes a very costly enterprise at some point too, right? And so there are certain things that we want to do, but it's probably going to have to be more along the lines of the DAO's responsibility to do some of these things. Like, anything related to the token, especially, is going to be very important, right? Anything related to making markets is going to be really important, right? And then you have to have the community buy-in to do that. And the community has to feel really good about these decisions too. And more or less, they have to understand it too, because I feel like everybody in crypto was taken advantage of in early years. Like you get kind of a sour taste in your mouth with aping in the stuff is really not an option anymore, right? And so, it's like people are like, let's see how this plays out before I make any kind of stupid decisions. But it's good too, because like if you look at our demographic of player, right? And people will compare us, like the demographic to kind of like the Magic the Gathering age group, right? Like I grew up playing Magic the Gathering, and you guys probably played something similar, right? Pokemon or any of those other games, right? But what you find in these is like people get frustrated with stuff, right? But they come back, and they come back because it's actually more or less like a form of social currency, and they have friends and a community that's large enough now to kind of just stick around and to be a part of. And it's something that lasts a long time. Traditional games have like a 2 to 5 year run cycle, but games like Pokemon and Magic the Gathering have 20, 30-year cycles on these Dungeons and Dragons types of things. These games stay for a very long time. And I think it was Magic the Gathering did like $1.7 billion in sales and retail sales in 2022, like some ungodly number, right? So it just shows you that like these audiences are valuable, you know what I mean? And you got to create that culture behind it. And sorry, you got my little ankle biter right here popping up on the couch, but the audiences are valuable, and they need to be maintained, and you have to be exciting. You have to have some level of change. Too much change kind of wards it off too. But that's kind of where we're at. That's where we're at as a community. There's a sales cycle in crypto that has a big impact on this too. So we'll watch that play out, but it's all very interesting. And I think a lot of it is based on sociology, right? But the idea is to stay alive. And if you stay alive in this, you're going to have the potential value for decades.
Well, PJ, I think, but before we really get into the nitty gritty of the validator project and what the SPS chain can kind of do for the game, I went back and listened to the down hall that you hopped on with Clay from last week, and you've mentioned technical debt both in that conversation and already in this conversation. What is the kind of depth of technical debt that we're sitting on, and kind of how close are we to executing on kind of the bigger pieces of that will open up the opportunity for some of that low hanging fruit that you alluded to a second ago?
Still working on land, right? Like land's been around for, yeah, you don't say, right? Still, yeah. But we have Cryptomancer's, like I've really come to appreciate that guy too. He's a hardworking guy and just absolutely loves the game. And he's just like, and I'm gonna give him a shout out here because I don't think he really knows how much I appreciate his hard work, but he's awesome.
I'd never tell this to his face, but
yeah, I'll tell you. Yeah. No, I've had, at first I don't think we liked each other because of my management style, right? But then you learn people's personalities and you give them some space, and that guy truly does fly, right? And then like Harry, for example, investigator, is now our VP of engineering, right? And he's been working on technical debt for years, right? Like that poor guy. Yeah, he's the hardest working guy in the company, I believe, right? He's awesome. And
shout out to Gator. We and preview for next week. He's coming on with us next week. So
yeah. Okay, so maybe don't air this before then. I don't want to give him too much of an ego. But
yeah, no promises there, PJ.
Easily the hardest working guy on the team. He is. He's just great, man. Like I said, I've really come to appreciate a lot of people on this team, unlike I used to get in like finance, and like because they just love this game. Like I don't know, there's like a true passion behind it. But we're still working on these things. You know what I mean? So the technical debt is there. Like there's so much like our onboarding, for example, right? Like we have the worst onboarding experience I've ever seen. I'll be very vocal about this one because we want new players to come into the game. They just don't know how to. It's really, really hard. And you have to have like, if you ever played Magic the Gathering, you probably didn't pick up the rule book and read it and then learn how to play. You had to probably learn from a friend, right? And like, that's kind of how Splinterlands is. And people, it's like you have to learn what all these things are, and it's really difficult. So we're fixing all of these things right now. Like these are just they're big projects though, and it affects a lot of different things, because then you have to learn. I mean, let's just think about it. And again, I'm not trying to harp on too much stuff, but like once you get into the game, then you have to figure out, why do you need a summoner spell book? And then you get 3,000 credits with it. And then you go try to buy a pack, but a pack is 5,000 credits. So then you go and try to figure out what you can use them for. A lot of people end up buying potions and not realizing what they're for. So then they're like, oh, I didn't realize I could rent cards and I could actually start there. So then they have to learn how to use the rental market. And then they're like, okay, once I figured this out, then it's like the difference between modern and wild and separating the two and trying to figure that whole thing out. And then you have land, and it's like, that is terribly complex. And then you have all these voting things that go behind it and the liquidity pools. And it's like, there's so much, I mean, there's just so many things, and you can't be good at all of them. You're not going to learn them all from, just a menu or anything like that. Like you have to go and watch videos and learn all this stuff. And a lot of the videos are old, you know what I mean? So we're still fixing a lot of these things. And, I'm looking forward to next year really being a great year for us because I think that the market sentiment is turning around, right? But as far as technical debt goes, validators is a big one. Validators is a really big one. And I want to give you a little emphasis to here. Like this is a very traditional and common problem to have when a startup becomes $1 billion company, right? Like all of a sudden you realize like this company is extremely valuable, right? And I think the valuation of Splinterlands was like multiple billions of dollars were being thrown around, right? Like huge. I mean, because we're the biggest Web3 project, the most users in Web3 of anything by like a lot, you know what I mean? There's very few things that had as many users as Splinterlands at the time. And just the number of sheer transactions and the volume of transactions is so much that's going on, so much value being moved around, right? And so, what happens is there's like, you guys ever watch Silicon Valley, the show? Remember the Trace Comas Club, right? Help me with the Trace Comas Club, right? Okay, so like when you think you have all of this money, all of a sudden you're like all these, investors are thinking like, you need to 10x this business, right? And, you need to 10x the value of the company. And behind the scenes, you're thinking like, oh yeah, I've got all this money, I can go do all of these other projects, right? So then that's kind of what happened. Aggie got this idea that like, we need to grow. And how are we going to do that? And, money's not really an option right now. Money is, it shouldn't be a blocker for any of this stuff. And so that was the beginning of GLS and Backyard Sports and all these other things that happen. And then those teams are huge, massive teams that are operating on the side, right? And GLS is actually where the validators actually started initially, because they're going to have validators that were going to go up, and there was like a really tight deadline on all that stuff. So it's just, the unfortunate thing is when you have all of that money and all of that value, what you should really do is narrow your focus and just focus on the one thing that has proven itself to work. You know what I mean? And try to figure out how to scale that to the masses, not take every idea that you have and go out there and try to just, spread yourself out, right? Like, it is a really good time to be deep and not wide, right? But that's not what investors are telling you. That's not, venture capital is like the worst to come in at those moments, because they're thinking that they bought in at a good valuation, but really it's the highest valuation the company's ever had. So priorities get mixed up, and it just becomes this thing where, it's not, I believe Aggie was trying to do the best thing in his interest, in the company's interest, and try to help everybody expand how much reach we had, without really understanding that, this is kind of a fault in the market itself. And this is a very common problem with startups, is thinking that you're going to 10x it because you're going to go wide rather than deep, right? So validators kicked off initially as like a GLS project. And so when Aggie's talking about things being worked on, like, yeah, it's true, it's being worked on, but it's being worked on by a separate team that is, has a very clear focus on trying to just get the end code up and get it running. So, and then, as you guys know, like, it started getting really haywire. Resources became really, really thin. The company never really had a chance to go out and raise like a real round of funding, right? Because everybody was expecting it to be this multi-billion-dollar company, but behind the scenes, we're like, but raising money is going to be really, really tough. And we're going to still try, right? But it's going to be really, really tough. And so, all these other things got put on the back burner. We had other goals that we had to hit that we were missing. Plus, on top of it, there was new feature sets coming out that we had to deliver. So as the team's getting smaller, the number of projects that they had to work on got a lot larger. The scope always gets blown out. And then you have just a really negative, like, I was with Matt in his car coming back from an introduction to the rest of the team for like the first time when FTX collapsed. And I just remember I'm sitting on a call, and he's listening to me to talk to this like group of people. And we're just like, oh, this is really bad. Like, this is really, really bad. You know what I mean? This is going to affect everybody. This is like, this is a horrible time to be in this industry right now. And this is going to impact us for like years, right? Like, we just knew it straight up. And so all of a sudden, reality starts to sink in. It's like the fun is over. You know what I mean? Like, this is going to get really tough. This is going to get really difficult. And, Matt fought for us a lot to keep the scope down on these projects. And unfortunately, validators would come up to the front, and then it would get pushed back, and it'd come back up to the front, and then it would get pushed back. And so, it started really irritating a lot of people. But the fact of the matter is, behind the scenes, we're knocking out other projects too that are, providing value at the same time. Like, Splinterlands has bills it has to pay, right? Most of the money that these token raisings we're doing, it's at some point it just becomes like, why are we even continuing to sell these when we know it's going to have a direct impact that correlates to asset prices? So we try to slow all of that down too. So then it just had to become, what do we have? Like, we really have to prioritize everything. And so we set aside 2 people to work on validators. They continue to work on validators. But then it gets to a point where, validators is like the thing we need to do now, right? And there's always, like, if you look at how we base all of our risk, like, we have a risk model that we follow that has like all of the risks for every segment of the business broken out with contingencies, right? We wanted to make sure that the DAO was like you call it like this eternal entity, right? So, Clay and these guys have funding. The DAO needs to make money, but it's not really the goal of the DAO to make money, right? DAO is really to regulate and act like the Fed for the token and have some basis of voting inside the ecosystem in the game too, right? So then it becomes a contingency. It's like, how, let's just say, for example, if the DAO, if let's I'm going to throw this out. This is not the case at all, but let's just say something happens to Splinterlands or something happens to Matt, or we get hacked or something happens. How was the DAO going to recover from that without the company itself, right? Like, is there even a possibility for it? So then we start talking about the team members that are most important. We create our key man list. We know who our key people are for certain assets, certain functions in the company, right? And so then we start taking our key people and saying, hey, you guys are going to work on infrastructure, and inside infrastructure, you guys are going to work on cutting costs, but you're also going to work on validators. And validators is a real big, important part of this market because A, it unlocks more decentralization for the community. And B, it also means that we have a team set aside that in case anything happens, knows how to run everything and has access to everything, you know what I mean? And knows how to take care of and run and operate. And it is a solely separate entity from Splinterlands, right? And so that's just kind of where the idea came from. And it's also a part of contingency as well. And so then, Matt, being, he's very strategic in the way that he thinks and the way that he proposes stuff. We thought, it'd be a really great opportunity for us to get in front of the community and see if the DAO would fund this project, because technically it is kind of like a DAO project, right? And then obviously we wanted to see if Hive was going to support us too. And I'm not like, I know the whole story of Hive. I was around when the Steemit separation happened, and the whole Justin Sun thing, like that was wild, right? It was a crazy time to be a part of that whole thing. But I wasn't in, like, I had written some, I think, early blogs on Steemit when I was working at Speaker about influence, right? But I wasn't too invested in the chain. I loved Dan Larimer's work at the time. When he was starting EOS, I was a big proponent of it. As I kind of showed you earlier, I was kind of following everything that they were doing. But, you could see kind of like what happened with EOS and the problems they had with their DAO and their governance and the DAO and the validators that they had. So it's like, it just kind of made sense at this point in time. Like, it can't, like, the market can't really get much worse in a sense for like Splinterlands. So at this point in time, like, we can start at the lows, then it becomes very possible for the DAO to start generating value for itself and value for the token. So when Matt reached out to Hive about proposing this whole project, it wasn't, in a sense, I think they said it was for like SPS chain or something like that. It wasn't really the case. I think it was worded terribly, but it was really, really good. Yeah, so the timing was right, and I think the sentiment has kind of changed. Like, we have people that are very invested in this ecosystem, and they want to keep on knowing what's happening, which I think we're going to have some more transparency here too, which is really good. The idea is to open source all of the code for validators and have it all thoroughly vetted before we go to market. But we're at a point right now where I don't know if you guys have ever had to like pull chain data or familiar with that whole process and how costly just how big the the Hive chain is. It's big, right? So we had to create a lot of infrastructure on top of this that would allow people to sync their nodes quickly. And we created, we use Cloudflare R2 for getting all of the chain data ready and prepared. So we're running through a thing right now where they're trying to see how long it takes to sync, and we can download about 1,000 transactions a second, right? And so it's really good. And we'll have all this stuff set up for the people that are going to run validators. And then we fall into internal testing in like the next 2 weeks, I think, which means we're going to pay for our own validation nodes to run. And then we're going to start swapping out services on Splinterlands to see how it works compared to the normal nodes that we run, because we have our own separate set of Hive nodes that we have to keep and operate at all times that are listening for broadcasts and listening for transactions to come in. So like, we're right on the cusp of this, but the idea is for me to come out and actually talk about this stuff on the DAO Hall and give everybody updates so that they know what's going on and what the money's being spent on, how it's being utilized, and who's working on what, right? And so we have our 3 best engineers on the infrastructure team, really just the primary infrastructure people that are joining us on this project, which is great. I'm not going to throw them under the bus. Yeah, I think everybody knows who they are, but my focus is to really just have them focus on product. I don't want them interacting too much and taking any flack from the community. We know how it goes here. People are always going to come in and, there's some people here that are consistently saying negative things and trying to undercut the market. We totally understand. We know where they're coming from, right? We're going to get this product out. We're going to put it in front of everybody. And, from there, hopefully, we'll let the open source community take a hold of it. And if it doesn't really matter to us, because we're going to continue working on it until completion. And at that point, we will rely on the DAO to basically take over at some point. But that's kind of the goal here. And I think it's a very honest and transparent way to approach this. I'm glad Matt, put the proposal up. I think it falls in line with responsibilities, right? I think it makes sense, right? But yeah, and again, I'm sorry to be so long-winded here, but there's a lot of information behind that whole entire concept. So, please ask away. I'll tell you as much as I possibly can, and hopefully, being unfiltered will at least show you where we're at, right?
No, yeah, it's great. I want to know. So, are we going with Jupiter? Is that it's kind of like a shortened acronym for Jupiter for the main event?
Yeah, so you can look up my website. It's terrible. This was not designed to be. So a lot of people I work with, especially when we were doing funds and managing funds, are overseas, and it's very hard to be a single entity, especially as a sole individual or sole proprietor, and work overseas. So I contract a ton of engineers through Jupiter. Like, this isn't its sole responsibility, right?
Okay.
So Jupiter itself was really just my engineering company. It doesn't really mean anything. And I just got clever with the name because it was a .io. So if you go to jptr.io, it's like some template website I threw up a while back, right? Yeah, the .io is because Io is the most active moon around Jupiter, the planet, right? So it was just a play on words, kind of similar to how First was, right? It was like, oh, Jupiter.io, which is the moon, right?
Yeah.
And so that was it. Like, there's no, it doesn't mean PJ backwards or anything else to that extent. Like, I've had a lot of people try to interpolate that one, but it doesn't mean anything at all, really. It was just a fun, easy, like, it's easy to put on an email address, you know what I mean? jptr.io.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was the impetus behind it. There's nothing, like, I can't give you a beautiful story about that one, unfortunately.
No, that's quite all right. Yeah. So this is like an entity you've set up a while ago that you just use as something to be able to hire contract people to do programming work for you or do other stuff.
Yeah, it's set up. The company itself was set up to manage contractors in engineering because there's regulations that we have to follow. If you work with engineers that are overseas, depending on what country they're in, you have like VAT or special
control stuff.
Yeah, you have all kinds of regulations that you have to follow. And it's not just the regulations here, it's in other countries. Like we've helped a lot of, well, not a lot, but I'll say we've helped a couple people get their H-1Bs and turn those into green cards in the past, right? We had a huge engineering team in Ukraine before the war started, and unfortunately they're all gone now, which is really sad. And even Russia, I had some really great quantitative engineers. Man, some of the best, smartest people came out of Russia, and unfortunately it's just all gone now. They either work for the military, they got drafted, or nobody knows where they are.
Yeah, I've heard that story way too many times the last couple of years from people in the space. But yeah, so you taken, so basically, do we have team members, Splinterlands team members who are going to be working through this entity, or they've kind of left Splinterlands to move over here to work on this stuff full time, or how is that structure breakdown?
Yeah, so we contract them out over here, and they were team members for the most part, but now we're contracting through. And Splinterlands does pay money to this contracting corporations in order to maintain. So like I come in and still do a lot of behind the scenes stuff with Matt. I still have to kind of be like more of a virtual CTO than anything else. So everything I do, like I'm working with our temp CFO in order to put together budget proposals and certain things behind the scenes. So Splinterlands covers some of the costs for that, but really a majority of the cost is going to be just this team working specifically on validators, and that's it. It's not 100% of the cost, and the team, validators is not being used for anything else other than that, validators. But like, for example, I go to board calls. I have to be, I have, not so much right now. I'm spending a lot of time doing like decks and presentations for possible investors and trying to put together like the roadmaps and stuff like that. Our technology team is like really good. Harry and investigators just got this on lock. So I felt comfortable saying like, hey, you're going to take over the day-to-day on this side. You know what I mean? You're going to have to kind of work with the team right now. I'm not going to spend, hours a day on deploying. Every Tuesday we go down for deployments, or every other Tuesday we'll do deployments. I'm not on those calls anymore. I don't do any of the morning scrum meetings that the team does. I try to be on them when I can, but for the most part, I'm literally just on phone calls and trying to, get through a lot of the, I would say just more of the administrative side of the business. And I don't need to necessarily be active in making decisions in infrastructure anymore because most of that's already done. And scaling is already built into this equation too. Like the ecosystem we have is built to scale really fast. And that's why we don't have a whole lot of faults in the game anymore. Do you guys remember when we were getting, do you guys remember the Lizard Squad was attacking us and they were telling us preemptively about DDoS attacks? Do you guys remember that? I don't know if you guys, it was, oh yeah, dude, we got so many funny stories like of things that have happened in this company. And it's like some of the world's worst hackers coming after us and just like, hey, we're going to hack you guys tomorrow at 5 p.m. on these addresses. Like just crazy stuff, right? We've kind of seen it all now. You know what I mean? Like we have a battle plan for just about everything. So everybody knows how to respond. It's very, I'm not gonna say like we're super proactive, but we're very, we know how to handle the reactive side of it really well. And our infrastructure costs are just so low now comparative to what we put out that it's a really comfortable situation to be in where we can actually take the time to focus and also start creating contingencies. And contingencies are very important in decentralized networks, right? Like having the ability to fall back on certain things. Like we have optionality. There's a lot of them. In fact, I have like a list of different contingencies and fallback plans that we go through. And we do it, not just on the tech side, but we also do it on the marketing side, which, we haven't been like crazy about marketing because of onboarding, right? And so you kind of like go through the list of things that have to happen. Another one's finances, like we have contingencies for finances, and then you have your key man contingencies, and then you have your systemic, non-systemic risk contingencies. And so this just felt like the right time and the right way to do it. And if we were going to apply for a grant from the DAO, then it couldn't be Splinterlands because then it's not really decentralized. So why don't we build something that we know will be at least outside of Splinterlands and have its own authority in a sense, and somebody that's trusted that, I guess wouldn't like, I don't own enough SPS to really like make it my prerogative to like try to hack this thing. You know what I mean? Or have any kind of financial incentive to do so. And to also, to be honest, like turn this project over at some point and not have it affect the bottom value of the company either. Right. Because even investors, like if you're talking to a board, one of the things that's really tough to deal with is investors coming in with equity and not taking token positions because they're going to want control. And control is something that's really hard to navigate around. In fact, you guys have probably seen that too with like Steemit. We saw it happen with EOS, right? Like you have the controlling body and then the governing body, which do not see eye to eye, and it causes a lot of conflict, right? So to do this best as possible is to just come out, trust the people that'll get it done, put it in front of the community, see if they'll support it. And if they do, then this is how we're going to run it. And that was kind of just the idea. And to be honest, like it's a pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do plan, right? And hopefully, these other companies that are also bidding on the project too have to understand like there is stuff that we need to fix on Splinterlands side and test that are kind of, in a sense, not really baked into this cost, but they are the people that built those services. So they are familiar with how it all works. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, it's the easiest and most cost-effective way to get it done without really putting forth too much effort having to train anybody. So it just made sense. It just made fiscal sense. And it just made, logical sense from our standpoint. And it seems like people are good with it. It seems like there is a bit of a pushback. Like we kind of know all these same recurring faces. It's like 5 to 10% of the community that always vote no, right? But people have their own purposes too, and we just kind of have to understand that too. Like our perspective is not the same as everybody else's, so the best thing we can kind of do is educate people on the topic. So hopefully that makes more sense, and definitely hope it instills more confidence.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand why having you guys or having those guys kind of move over and then work on it from that other company makes sense. But if you're looking at it from how do we decentralize this, it does kind of make sense where if we have someone who's like the Peak Monsters guys who are not or never been employees of Splinterlands, kind of building it out, then there's a greater argument for decentralization. So, and I don't know if that's something where maybe once this thing is up and running and running a little bit more smoothly over the next 12 to 18 months and it can be passed on or something like that. Do you think that makes sense from a decentralized point, or is this something where you're like, no, these guys are kind of not have any sort of connection to, it's tough because if you're running the other company or the CTO of Splinterlands, they're still sort of, at least that argument for that it's more centralized there, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, true. I mean, we could also just completely turn everything over and hand it over to everybody, but I guarantee you there's two faults here that people don't really take into consideration, which is Splinterlands still has to do a lot of work to integrate with those teams to make sure that the game can operate on what they're doing. So communication is going to be a major barrier, period. And I don't know, I've talked to Jarvie and Asgarth in the past, and I know their position in the market too, right? Like they definitely have incentives to take over this project. But honestly, like the best thing we can do communication wise is just have the people that originally built most of this stuff try to fix it and to get this thing off the ground, right? And what we can do, and again, it's really the DAO's position, not our position, about how the funding is related to this. But when we start open sourcing this stuff, the idea is to open it up so everybody can commit to it. And at that point in time, if more money wants to be allocated to the project, or, if for any reason, anything happens to us over here on this end, everybody will have access to it and the project will be able to continue on. And that's about the best we can hope for. You know what I mean? It's easy to always come in and undercut a project when you don't have the full scope. You have to realize, though, that Splinterlands has to run on top of this, and communication is key. And if we're having to go back and forth and test things, just because it seems good on paper, it doesn't really pan out in the overall scheme of things, right? So just having the people that built the initial infrastructure, not the initial, but the people that have helped us fix the infrastructure, just made sense for us to do it this way. And it's not going to convince everybody. I mean, you can always make a case against it, but from our standpoint, like this is a very valid concern, and it's also a very costly one. Have you guys ever had to managing projects? Communication is key, right? And having the ability to go back and forth and test things, and also understand where the liability is, like who's supposed to be doing what, right? Like many a times people ask us to change the APIs over here or to make adjustments to the APIs that are used in Splinterlands, and they don't realize, there's like significant cost to all these things, right? Engineers are not cheap, right? And the way Splinterlands runs things, especially on APIs right now, is like it's free for everybody to hit. You can hit it all day long. We're not guarding it by making people pay fees for keys or anything like that. Like we try to keep everything pretty open, and hopefully that kind of resonates in this, or resonates in this feeling too. It's not, we're not trying to make money off of this project. We're just trying to get it done because we want the overall success. Like I'm invested in Splinterlands the company, right? I'm not a huge player in the game. I'm not a huge holder of tokens. So Splinterland's success is really dictating my success in this whole entire ecosystem. So I want Splinterlands to succeed. And so, as far as the DAO is concerned, like if the DAO does well, then Splinterlands will do well. Like there's definitely an arm's length valuation that happens there. But, we're all kind of committed to the same thing, and I think for all the right reasons, if it makes sense.
Yeah. Real quickly, PJ, and I think if I'm understanding this correctly, it looks like the team over at Peak Monsters has maybe reneged on their offer. I know their proposal was sitting in draft as of yesterday. I don't see it, therefore it should have moved into official proposal stage at this point, but I don't see it as having moved over. So as far as I can tell, it looks like they have pulled out their bid. Is that what you have heard?
I don't follow it too much, to be honest. I don't.
Okay.
And I'm not, like I said, I have very, very clear orders, and I listen to my boss, which is Matt. You know what I mean? Matt's my boss. I'll let him make those decisions. I try not to engage. It's too costly on our end. People will take whatever we say and run with it a million different directions. So I'll let Matt deal with that. Maybe I know you guys had Matt on here the other week, and you can talk more to it. And then as far as the Peak Monsters guys, like teach their own, like they've got their product, it serves us to really help them out to, let me make a case here too. Like Splinterlands doesn't focus too much on its markets, even though it'd be a great source of revenue for us, right? We could easily try to mimic and copy a lot of the stuff that goes on in markets. And there's obviously, like I've worked on exchange models a lot in the past, and we just choose not to, because that's, again, like we try to focus deep, and we're not trying, let other people make money on those things and exist in the ecosystem. It's beneficial to all of us, and it spreads out the cost, right? Totally understandable. you're not going to see us try to compete with people on that front. It's a good mechanism for the market to maintain its own values, right? Its own separate set of services that go into it. Again, we supply the API for all this stuff, right? Like we'll give you access to everything. We're not really trying to make money on this. We're trying to support other people in the ecosystem because it helps us. It helps us grow. It helps bring value, right? And I think, the other one was the Hive proposal too. I want to say at one point we were like 90% or more of the total transactions on Hive when we were cooking back in 2022, right? I think it's less than that, but it's still a very large, significant amount of transactions in the ecosystem, right? And so maybe there's burnt bridge or spilt milk somewhere in the past where, Aggie and those guys didn't get along, or Matt and them didn't get along. I don't know, to be honest. I'm really not too focused on the issues behind the scenes. Financially and fiscally, it makes sense to me for us to get support because that's what that's what a lot of ecosystems do. They invest back in the things that bring value to them, just kind of like we do. You know what I mean? So, we put in, I think it was like $500,000 back into the DAO on the last card edition sale, which is awesome. It's a great amount of value, right? So we're kind of asking for some of that back now to help finish projects, should be carried on by it, which is why I think that proposal is just kind of like the timing's really good, right? But then, you look at the ecosystem Hive and you look apples to apples, like, all the ancillary services from Splinterlands and the value that it brings to Hive, I think is great. It's not the only value by far, right? But like, it should mean something. Like there's meaning in all of that. You know what I mean? It's not like we're bad people. We're trying to survive and we're trying to get through a rough patch, right? That, people always point the fingers at us because, we're not perfect a lot. Our execution is not great at times. And we've been very, very low level, trying not to burn out the community as of this like last year and a half, especially because of what's going on in the broader market. But like, we still keep our APIs open. The market still has like no fees other than the small DEC transfer fee, which is to just stop bots from taking advantage of the market, right? Like we're trying to support everybody and we're not trying to make money off of everything. We're just trying to focus at what we're good at, right? I mean, that takes time. You just kind of accept, we get trashed on all the time and there's all this negative sentiment that comes around us, but it's like, what are other things people could be doing to help themselves too? Like how many payment providers are tied in the Hive? Can you name any?
No.
No,
Nope.
because we built we built a lot of these, right? Like we had to do this stuff. And it's like, what would happen if we opened up these markets and made some kind of easy bridging between all the EVM projects in Solana? What do you think would happen to Hive prices and what would happen other than the stuff that's on centralized exchanges, right? Like, what do you think would happen if our tokens were on, 15 different decentralized exchanges across, 5 or 6 different EVMs, right? Like, this is always one of my most like favorite subjects to talk about because I know a lot about this offhand, but like, what we have a problem with in Hive and Splinterlands is like all of our liquidity is stuck in a single chain, right? And it becomes a very, very walled garden, right? And you have when you have a deep markets are very heavy, which has a lot of weight on the token price. It actually forces token prices down because you only have surface level activity in deep markets where that liquidity never gets touched, right? So when I used to go and make market, and I teach a class on this stuff, the first thing you do is you just spread your markets out. That's it. And then when you spread your markets out, all of a sudden volatility becomes a thing, right? Then you have token volatility where coin market cap says it's this price, but CoinGecko is on a different chain. They're looking at it's this price. You can arb the difference of those. Now you're getting transaction fees, right? And so now rather than being an inflationary token that's dumping value into people that are making these LP positions, you have real liquidity provisioning happening on a bunch of different chains that all have access to payment providers, right? So like we need to start having these conversations and, that's part of like, it's not our responsibility for the most part because we're not operating the chain. We're just a game on the chain, but we have to do these things ourselves. And you don't hear us like complain about it that much, right? But we all know it's a problem. Everybody that plays the game knows it's a problem, right? And so everybody in the ecosystem, looks and like we have 2 major markets on the ecosystem, but there's all of these markets over here to the right of us that are doing $1 billion in transactions a day, and we're not a part of any of that. You know what I mean? We're very like I think they have one token contract on ETH that never gets used, and another one that's on Binance Smart Chain, which was the original SPS contract, right? But like people want us on centralized exchanges. And I think that's a horrible idea. Like if anybody's ever tried to get a token launched, and I don't know what our conversations are with the centralized exchanges, but I've tried to do this in the past. Like they want millions of dollars to put tokens on those exchanges. And a lot of these guys have like professional liquidity management companies or market makers that are behind the scenes. And a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these market makers too are like tied directly to FTX. And they're just basically taking your valuable token over here and selling it behind the scenes over here on a decentralized market and making markets and making money on this stuff. And it's not helping any of the projects out. It's just making a very few select people a lot of money. So you have to be very careful. And that's what I think is very important to us as an ecosystem, is understanding these things and really kind of in a sense broadening out our reach and our extent. But Splinterlands itself has had to do a lot of this on its own, right? And we don't get a lot of support, and we don't really we haven't really asked for it a lot in the past. But I think it's important that we start doing it and we start seeing the reinvestment back in the ecosystem, because there are ecosystems out there that do support a lot of their projects, and there are methods and payment providers and liquidity providers and people who do arbitrage and engineers that don't even realize that we're out there and that we were as big as we were. Just imagine how much money is like it's possible for the community and for everybody else that's involved once they start to realize that just opening up these markets would be a fantastic thing for us to do. So like I said, I think it's important. I think that's really key to the whole ideology behind decentralization. But should we be paying for all this ourselves? Personally, I don't think so. And I think it's a really wise decision for us to try to figure out how to get some help doing these things. And I'm not sure, again, the proposal for Hive is outside of kind of what we're talking about right now, but if we wanted to reflect on it and have a real discussion about it, I think that those are the types of things that are most valuable to my end of the conversation.
We've discussed that a little bit, and so I know Matt had said, and he doesn't want to leave Hive, and he totally supports Hive.
Yep.
And that the team, will be too big of an undertaking to like, we're not picking up stakes and moving somewhere. But, so what would it take to kind of get exposure to those other chains? Would it take, and like we said, some of these other chains, they're giving, millions of dollars to people to develop games on there. Is there a way to reach out to them and say, hey, can you guys, spend some of that money on putting a team together to, we're not going to move off a Hive, but we can open up so that we could bridge, to get exposure to these other places.
Man, I love Clay, like Claiborne, like I've just been like drilling into him with all the good, like good conversations. We have really good conversations once a week around this stuff too. We don't, the idea is not to leave Hive, right? Like we don't want to leave Hive. Our whole fucking ecosystem is tied to Hive, like everything, right? And so it's like, I don't want to do that. It doesn't make sense for us to do that, but damn, it would be really great if we got some support. You know what I mean? And I don't, again, like I said, I don't know the conversations that have happened in the past. I don't even know the people involved in Hive at this point. Like I have no prior relation to any of this. It just makes sense, right? But we don't have to do any of this crazy like pick up and move or any of that stuff. All we need to do is we just need to launch a wrapped version of our coins and get the liquidity providers to park them in wallets so that we can make markets in other chains. And that's it. It sounds easy. Obviously, it's a little bit more complicated than that. We have to create the bridging mechanism. We have to have our token basically launch as ERC20s, and those ERC20s have to have just all the standard stuff. Like we want to make sure that the ERC20 token contracts are managed by a wallet that is managed by the DAO, not by me, an engineer, right? You need to make sure that it has the mint burn functionality, which is really easy to do. You also need to have some kind of pausable mechanism in case it does get hacked. You may have to stop the contract. I don't know if we want upgradability as part of it, but like Open Zeppelin makes a really good contract library for all the Solidity stuff that has upgrade mechanisms. And there's different proxy patterns you can use behind launching smart contracts on EVMs too, which are really great. And then you have all these L2s that kind of have their own take or their own flavor or version of EVM on top of it. So there's a little bit of finagling you have to do. But for the most part, like if you wanted a really easy thought experiment, go on Uniswap and look at all of the EVMs that Uniswap follows. And then all of a sudden, all of those is a potential market for us once we're on EVMs, right? And it's really simple. And those potential markets, it's like, the conversations that I would have would be like, hey, Polygon, we're thinking about moving some of our liquidity over here. Would you guys support us in a pool and just park some of your some of your Matic over there and allow us to make markets and allow you guys to participate in the market making function behind this? That way we can hook up payment providers and give you guys more utility too, because it's going to bring more value to Hive. It's going to bring more people into the ecosystem. It's going to bring more players into our game, but it also just makes it a lot more accessible to everyone. And you don't even have to be a player in the game in order to participate in the market making portion of it, right? You could just be an LP, or you could just be a guy that stares at charts all day long and looks at arbitrage opportunities. There's smart contracts that you can deploy that will, look at triangular arbitrage opportunities between stable coins and volatile coins that you can just run, that will just automatically run. And when you start creating all these balance and differences in prices, right, you're going to increase transactional volume. Transactional volume turns into fees. Fees turns into basically value, right? So like it, again, I'm kind of harping because this is something I know a lot about, but that's the idea. That's the MO behind this, the modus operandi behind why we do something like that. And you don't have to leave Hive to do it. You just have to have EVM compatible contracts to do this stuff. So this isn't even like a proposal, like we're just talking openly about this because these are all things that we were talking about, Hive, what Hive could also do to help. These are all things that we could do together. You know what I mean? Like this just makes sense, right? And this is just another thing. Like Hive has such a good, unique value proposition, and it's been around for a long time. So it's got its seasonality to it. But if you go look at how many people actually contribute to the GitHub repository, there's like 6 people in the last year. Right. So like we don't want to lose that. And I feel like Splinterlands has more engineers working behind the scenes on this stuff than they do at this point in time. Like it's very hard to keep people motivated if they're not seeing the value return to them. And then you just have this downward pressure on the market, becomes deep markets, which we talked about, has downward force on price. And you don't want to fall into that spiral, but it seems like everybody in crypto kind of falls into that spiral at some point in time. And there's an easy remedy to it. You just got to flatten out the markets and you got to thin them out across multiple markets. And that usually does it.
Is there no, this is all brilliant stuff. So I'm kind of envisioning this longer term. Is the plan to wrap up the validators and then move into this sort of DeFi game?
We don't even need to wrap up validators to do this. Like if we had support, we would just do it. And it doesn't require, we have ERC20 contract writers that are a part of the community. We don't have to do this. We just got to get it approved and get it checked out. I mean, shit, you can go on ChatGPT, it'll write you an ERC20 contract. Yeah. I'll give you a website right now that I created that creates ERC20 tokens. I use it for demos all the time. It's literally created like, there's like 100 tokens a day made on it. It's TKXX.CryptoMonks, CryptoMonkz.com. You can go on there, tie in your wallet, and it'll just create whatever shitcoin you want to create. And yeah, you can go on there, you put in how many decimals you want it to be, how many you want it to mint, and you can call it whatever you want, and it'll just automatically deposit those coins in your wallet. And you can go out and use that to make a market on any Uniswap compliant chain you want. And that's it. Like, it's that simple, right? We want some control over it, right? So these are all things that we ought to be considering. I'm not going to put up the proposals because I don't feel like anybody knows who I am, but these are all things that we could do in parallel. It doesn't have to be Splinterlands that does this. We could talk to Clay about doing things like this, right? And the narratives that come behind this stuff are just tremendously valuable, right? This is like social currency. You can take these things and talk about them intelligently without having to be too involved. It just makes sense, right? So, it doesn't rely on me. It doesn't rely on any specific engineer. We probably have a ton of EVM, Solidity engineers that have listened to your podcast before that would have a leg to stand on to help out with this project. Now, it has to run through the DAO. The DAO has to be able to do these things, and we should try to find and source liquidity for these projects because we want everybody to be on board. But this, if Splinterlands could get rid of its inflationary pools and just focus on LP and have payments roll through it, like, damn, that's a great business model. You know what I mean? And it's great for the DAO too. The DAO has a way to make money, which is what a lot of people talk about. Well, I'll give you a good solution. That's all you have to do. Right. So, sorry to harp. These are just ideas, guys. Like I'm not saying I want to do them, but hopefully everybody starts to realize like we have a lot of opportunity we just need some cohesion here, and we just need people to think on a level plane and really just kind of remove the emotionality out of most of this stuff. A lot of people are very emotional in this in this conversation.
Yeah, like you bring it back to that thing you said, a lot of people want it to be, us to get listed on more centralized exchanges. I feel like people just think that's sort of this magic bullet where,
Yeah.
okay, you do it and all of a sudden all these people have access to the token and increases transaction volumes. It's, you never see it play out that way. Like when I remember when SPS got listed on like crypto.com and it was just like, a lot of people were like, this is it. But I'm like, no, it's not. It's like, that's just not the way it's going to work, but I think a lot of people sort of, maybe we need to get, you to do your class as like a webinar that we can, post
I
up
would
on the
love
website
to.
or something, man. And so we can
Man,
get everybody to kind of understand that more.
I would absolutely love to do it. Like now you're talking like things I love to do. I've taught like over 5,000 people how to do agile project management, and probably just as many people how to use Uniswap v3. Like I've been deeply ingrained in Uniswap since version 2. And I like it's not once you understand how market making works, everybody here is going to be like, oh crap, like I can do this myself. And it doesn't take a lot of momentum to make it valuable. And once you start creating value, more people are going to follow what you do because they also start to see the same thing happening. And then it just becomes this cycle. Like I said, remember how influence is like very important is this, like if I could show you who's making money and how they're making money, you're probably going to want to do the same thing, right?
Yeah, right.
And crypto doesn't have a lot of those narratives right now. It's very difficult. And everybody wants what's, I'll just, and not to like harp here too much again, but like Splinterlands, even at its lowest point right now, has more daily active users than like 99.999% of crypto projects. And I don't think people understand just how valuable that is. And like the people that are still here, like we all seem to be relatively with not regards to myself, but I'm talking as the community, like they're invested in the benefit of this. Like they kind of understand it. There's just no real understanding of how to do it. You know what I mean? And we don't have the cohesion that you would normally find in a lot of these other chains where people are very supportive on both ends. Because I don't know what happened. I mean, I don't know where the disconnect is with Hive and Splinterlands, but you would think that there would be these two mutually compatible groups that would be benefiting each other for the sake of each other's success. And maybe it'll come. Maybe hopefully this is one of those things where we can, both communities can agree on at this point where like it makes sense for us to do this, not just for Splinterlands, but for Hive too. And the centralized exchanges, like, why would anybody want that? I mean, isn't that the whole point of this? It's like you're gonna call yourself a decentralized community, but then you're gonna give it to the same people that act like bankers back in 2007. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to like if it takes an hour to learn how to make a Uniswap pool and to create your own tokens, like you just became more informed and more intelligent than like 99.999% of the people in finance. It's like for this very specific purpose, right? Like all of a sudden you are like the intelligent person behind the scenes, and you all of a sudden like you just have more opportunity, and opportunity is a big thing, especially nowadays, right?
Well, man, I know that Clay has been working, hard and heavy on DeFi reform. That's kind of been his bread and butter for the better part of the 2024, I would say. Most of the stuff that we've heard from Clay has been around addressing, liquidity pools and trying to talk to market makers and work on all of this stuff. So hopefully we can get past the bottleneck and Clay pushes something through. But like Hep says, man, I would love to. I know you mentioned that you were planning on hopping on some down halls and moving forward. It would be awesome to just have a segment where we can educate the community and there's a lot of sharp folks in the Splinterlands community and the Hive community. Yep. And the more that we can empower them with this sort of knowledge, the better off we're all going to be as a community. And you mentioned something really interesting about that Hive Splinterlands being kind of two separate communities, and there's not quite the realization that it should be symbiotic. It should be mutually reciprocal. And it credit to Hive, it feels like that doesn't happen because the Hive blockchain has made it so easy to operate on the Hive blockchain. a lot of folks will be buying these tokens, buying the cards, and you really almost never have to exit Splinterlands and do stuff on the Hive blockchain. So, maybe this is kind of that realization point, that wake up call that, hey, we are on Hive, and there's a lot of other opportunity over there, and hopefully we can kind of double down on the symbiotic relationship that does exist. But yeah, go ahead, man.
Yeah, so you guys have heard Matt talk about Hive in the past. Like, when I came into this, I'm like, fuck, why are we stuck on Hive? You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing, guys? Like, this chain, we're like 90% of this chain right now. And then you kind of sit there and you realize after a minute, you're like, damn, this actually works really fucking well, especially for our use case. You know what I mean? And then you're like, okay, like, there could be some work done here or whatever, but really you have to start to evaluate, like, is the juice really worth the squeeze here? Like, do we really want to, like, it works really well for us. It seems like there's other things that we can do to fix these problems. And it doesn't mean giving up Hive at all. You know what I mean? It just means, like, access is a huge one. You know what I mean? And making these markets interoperable between other chains. I mean, that was kind of the bread and butter of, like, Polkadot and all these other guys, right? And it just comes down to, like, how easy, like, how much of an investment do payment providers have to make, and what do they get out of it by coming over to Hive, right? Like, how many people need a payment provider that's going to spend time and money developing on Hive ecosystem just to be able to take, like, payments from PayPal or, from some third party, a Coinbase wallet or something like that, right? Not a lot, right? Because if they get Splinterlands, and that's all they really need at this point to be successful, because that's where most of your purchases are going to come from. And they don't want us to go out and shop that. They'll be like, hey, we'll make the investment in building the payment provider, but we don't want you to use any other payment provider. We want all your payments to go through us. And that's kind of the mutually exclusive contract that you get with it. And it's not bad. Like, and kudos to the payment providers too. Like, they took a bet on us too. You know what I mean? Like, they have to invest money in order to get over here. But should that really be the way it is? Like, I don't think so, And again, I can't speak on behalf of Hive, but there is a mutual benefit to us both. And those are the conversations I don't necessarily see happening, right? Although I would love to see them happen. And I think that there is some kind of cohesive factor behind that. But I am definitely not the spokesperson for this. Like, I can talk about it, but that's, again, I have my position in the marketplace is strictly a technical one. You know what I mean? And I'm really good at finding solutions to problems like this. And to me, it just, I don't want to have to interact on the day-to-day to it because I'm very busy. But, the community should, for sure, right? And maybe we're planting a seed. I don't know if this is even something that's worth pulling in, but obviously it seems like there is, right? Like, I think, the sentiment there it's a positive one, right? That's a good conversation to have, right? So, there's a lot of things like this, though. I could talk about Splinterlands and just the simple things we could do over the course of the next year that'll really have a big impact. That and a lot of the stuff that Matt's been doing, it just takes time in order for these things to catch up. But, like, we have to be real. We have an inflationary token that's in a very deep market. So what's going to happen? It's going to have downward force on the price. We can fix these problems pretty easily, right? It just takes time. And you guys hear my dog get crazy. Sorry. My dog is trying to beat down my door to get in here. Like I said, he turns into Cujo, but, and it's like, I don't know. I guess I would ask you guys, like, have you ever had conversations like this before? Is this something that is considered? Like, I just don't know. And this is one of those things where I fall definitely short on understanding, but you guys would probably be far more informed on the sentiment behind these things and the communication behind it than I am, by far. Throw it back to you
I
guys.
think the biggest piece that has been the single thread between us and Hive, for me personally, has been Azurcon. I'm sure you know the name, the guy, but he's really been the best ambassador for Hive as far as what we're doing here. But as far as these conversations, I have no idea. I'm pretty ignorant to what's happening on Hive and what that relationship ultimately looks like. I think they're there were some things that kind of came to light as a result of this DHF proposal going out there. It looks like we did just get funded, by the way, and I know the first handful of payments have started to trickle through, which is great to see. And obviously it is dynamic, and we've got to keep that support up. And like I said, I think this kind of will serve in retrospect as a little bit of a awakening period for the folks on Splinterlands, and hopefully we start to burrow in a little bit further on Hive and make the most of what we got. And I would love to see this kind of DeFi game pan out, and hopefully Clay takes the baton and runs with it. And I know his initial contract is coming to an end before too long. It sounds like this. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Clay is awesome, by the way. Like, Clay gets he gets beat up pretty bad from people, but I will tell you, he's behind the scenes, like, trying to make stuff happen, and he has to deal with it on both ends, man. I have a deep respect for Clay, and I know where he came from in all of this too, like what he had to deal with. And if you just like, nobody really understands how much he has to work behind the scenes. I mean, he's got to deal with my bullshit too, and he's always asking me like, oh, you know what, how long is this going to take? What do we got to do? And I'm always like, I'm not going to give you a timeline. Like, I'd be shooting my devs in the foot right now, yada, yada. And he always asks about markets. We have a deep conversation about markets and how to handle these things. But and it's just like so much footwork behind the scenes that has to happen. It takes just kind of a really special type of personality to do it. So I hope his contract does not end. I hope that's not where this is going, but I think he's worth every red cent that we give him, and I love working with him too. I think he's got the right personality for it. And you can tell he's just, his heart and his mind are in the right place too, especially when he talks about it. He's not aggressive with anybody. He's not out there trying to do anyone over, right? Like, he's in it for all the right reasons too. And it takes a really humble soul to do that.
Yeah. No, I mean, being the public face of the DAO is a tall task, and like you said, all the public stuff that happens.
The king or the prince.
Exactly.
Yeah,
he is the DAO's whipping boy for sure. Yeah, I don't know when his contract is up, but I'm with you, man. I would love to see Clay's contract extended, and hopefully he can kind of go out with a bit of a bang on this first contract and get some of this DeFi protocol into place as at least proposed. Because I think, like you said, the just on the transaction fees alone, that should provide us with enough value to more than pay for Clay's salary, which it feels like a no-brainer.
Yeah, it feels like a no-brainer. Obviously these are all hypotheticals, right? Like, don't get it twisted. Like, none of the stuff that we've talked yet has come to fruition, but we have a lot of optionality. Like I said, it really just takes some understanding on the community's behalf. We have to educate the community on a lot of these things as well. And again, none of this stuff has actually really been proposed by anybody in the community. And you guys know that we were like the first and only company to get bonds on SushiSwap, right? SushiSwap, even though it's less relevant than it was before, Clay got all that to happen, and I don't think anybody realized how much work that was on behalf just to make sure that we could get everything set up. But the company behind the scenes had us running through hoops, telling us we could do things, and then we would do it, and turns out we couldn't. And so we'd have to go through and fix a bunch of other things to get set up, do things on another chain. And then all of a sudden they tell us like, oh yeah, sorry, we didn't realize we didn't do that chain either, but we can go back to the original one. And then we went back to BSC to do this stuff. Like, it was such a difficult process, but we got it done. And now we know how to do it. You know what I mean? And the bonds are a great experiment in a sense to see if it could happen and see where DeFi would help us. And I think it had a little bit of an impact, not a lot. But these are things, now we know how to do it. We can do these things over and over and over again. We just need support, right? We need the community to be bought in and to understand why these things are valuable, right? And without that, it's going to get, it'll just continue to be difficult, right? So I'm sorry, this little guy's going crazy over here. He smells my other dog, and he's just like trying to figure out where they went. So I apologize if he's causing a bit of a problem.
I can't hear a thing, man. You're all good.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, he's there is food over here, so he is going to be relentless until he gets what he wants. So I apologize, but so I would just, again, like, I hope this doesn't seem like I'm prodding either, but like, I'm trying to figure this out too. And you guys seem to have a pretty good platform here. what are other things though that we could consider in this sense? Like I love listening to ideas and I love to brainstorm on stuff, but like you guys probably have your ears pretty close to the ground. Obviously, it's baked into what you guys talk about and how you guys communicate too. Just what else is it? Like what else can we do right here to help this situation? And like I said, we'll start to see things happen for sure. Um, but we need to keep this conversation alive as well. And it needs to be a one that's probably the utmost importance, especially from a communication standpoint.
Yeah, I think we've kind of taken a good focus where it's sort of like we're going to work on, getting the onboarding and new pair experience, and
Oh yeah.
everything's kind of on hold to that, and then we're gonna, increase that. And I think that's really important, and so I've kind of just been very accepting of that and just kind of, let's wait and like let's get that train rolling first, and then we'll start seeing. And I feel like I wasn't on the episode, but we these guys talked with Matt about it before, and Matt's like, and this is the problem too, is like we talk to a lot of people. A lot of people have great ideas, and we love to like share people's ideas and things to do, but it's these things take money, these things take time, and it's where are we going to focus our resources? It's easy to come up with 1,000 great ideas, but it's the more you can't implement these ideas as fast as you can come up with them. So it's kind of like that thing now where I feel like it's just like let's just focus on what the key priority is of the team, and then just support them with that, and get through this hurdle, and then once that starts rolling, maybe we'll have more manpower that we can start to really look at some of these different gameplay aspects that people want to see come into the game.
Yeah, Jangles, you were about to say something too. Sorry, I didn't. I'm just sitting here like I agree.
No, yeah, that's all good. I feel like there's so much, Hep, you're absolutely right. I think, from the gameplay perspective, a lot of that stuff is out of the community's hands anyways. We just gonna have to sit back and let it pan out as the team continues to develop and drop this stuff into production every couple of weeks. And, hopefully by the end of the year, we're in a very marketable position from a gameplay standpoint. And that's, certainly the intention of Matt and everybody on the team that's kind of, doing the deliverables. But as far as us in the community, I feel like our opportunity is really there for the DAO and this sort of stuff that you're talking about, PJ, with, playing the DeFi game and getting the DAO in a place where it could be sustainable in perpetuity. And, eventually, my kind of idea for what maybe I'm misinterpreting, but my understanding of the validators kind of ultra long term is to host all of the in-game actions. So not just the SPS token related stuff, but everything else.
Correct.
So obviously that's okay. So obviously that's a big piece, but I feel like there's so much other opportunity with like this DeFi related stuff. And you asked what can we do? I feel like, you followed that up by mentioning keeping the conversation alive. That's really where it starts and stops for me is as long as we're having the conversation, the ideas around what the DAO can do to help, what the community can do to help, those ideas are going to continue coming. So, man, I would love to see, maybe it's like a bi-monthly AMA with PJ on the down hall or something like that. And,
oh God.
He's God, no, please don't make it.
I mean,
sign my ass up, right? Yeah.
Seriously, man, I would love to see it, and especially now that we've moved to a place where there's only monthly town halls. The community is kind of starved for like that. We've historically been spoiled. It used to be weekly town halls, and the level of transparency was through the roof, and we've scaled it back.
You guys think it's good. It's horrendous on the team members, man. Oh my God, it's brutal.
I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. It's so it's so tough. So tough. Right.
Well, I mean, the main idea that I think we could probably get across, and maybe it's just monthly PJ appearances on the down hall, just to kind of pull ideas and get that stuff incubating, in terms of what can the DAO do to support the team. And like you said, the value of the DAO is directly tied to Splinterlands. The value of Splinterlands is directly tied to the DAO, and we are the DAO. So we should 100% be investing as much as we can to perpetuate that sucker. So yeah,
I agree. Yeah. So like, and other things I would say too, like onboarding is a real thing here. Like we've had a real problem figuring out onboarding. If you guys like, I started a focus group specific to that, like, and I would love to see more people partake in that focus group. You know what I mean? I'll pay for your packs. I'll pay for whatever to get people to just run through it for a first time and give us feedback. You know what I mean? You know, maybe that's something that we do more publicly, because I'm not afraid to wear that on my sleeve and say, yeah, like this could definitely be better. This needs to be a lot better, actually, right? It should be. I used to have this book that I carried when I first started learning programming. It was called Don't Make Me Think. And it was about UI UX. That's it. And it just says, don't make me think. That was the title of the book, right? And we are so far from that right now. It's like, I got to think, and then I got to think of who I'm going to call to help me think about these things I'm thinking about. You know what I mean? And then I'm going to make them think about it too, right? It's like trying to figure all these things out. But it would be really nice to get some perspective here. And then there's an internationalization piece of this too. Like, we need to internationalize a lot of the stuff that's on the website. Like, we're very aware of these things, and we'll get these things done too. Everybody can have some faith in that. But those are things that we could do publicly that, you know, I would love to see happen. You know, it's like, hey, let's get a focus group on and prove to these guys that it's hard to do onboarding. That's easy to do. Let's go ask people that are crypto people to see if they could sign up and play the game and see what happens, right? See what kind of questions they have. Because that's a feedback loop that should be continually happening, right? That feedback loop should be constant. And it's not like we're not aware of it. We have quality assurance testing, but I mean, this is a big ecosystem. This is a really big ecosystem for what it is, right? So there's so much that has to be tested. There's not time for every development cycle for us to do those things. So I would consider that too. Like, I would love to see those things happen, and I would love to be that part of public forum, just so that everybody knows that we're aware of how these things are affecting the overall gameplay and how we can make them better. Because I think this is a long-term picture here, and we'll continually progress. But, you know, and everybody just needs to understand our position is right now is we want to finish all the promises that we made before we start layer caking more stuff on top of it. And we want to make this a very easy experience for people to join in and to see how they can progress through the ranks and create value for themselves, create value for the community, and make it fun, right? Like, the overall game is so repetitive that you could lose value in the fun of it really quickly, unless you're thinking strategically and you're also thinking financially, right? So, you know, we can have those two things not have to be so correlated. We could have ones that are people who are focused more on the finance side of it, and people who are mostly focused because they love playing the game, right? And they love collecting. So I agree. As far as, like, you know, teaching and getting in front of the community and helping with these things, like doing liquidity positions and market making, just let me know when you're ready. I'll come back on. Like, happy to have that conversation, right? And I would love to see other people that also make content around Splinterlands kind of think about that cohesively too. It's really easy to point the finger and make content that drags through all the negatives, right? But we should be providing narratives and hope that these things will be taken care of, because that's what we do on our end, right? But then on top of that, like, we also need to think about the narrative of, like, okay, well, this is what we have. This is good enough for these things, and these are how these things work, and we should be sharing that with everybody, right? So, you know, maybe I'm an optimist here, the eternal optimist here, but coming again from somebody who does not have a lot invested in the assets, but has a lot invested in the company, you know, I think these are all easy problems to fix, like I said, and I look forward to it. And you know, being public about these things is part of what we need to do. Totally fine with it. But our time, you know, we are busy people. So, you know, a DAO haul every week would be suicide as far as trying to get anything done. But, you know, that's why platforms like this are super important to us. And, you know, I was kind of worried at first about coming out and talking out to the audience, because nobody really knows who I am or what we do behind the scenes here. And I try to keep it that way for good reason. But I do have a responsibility too, to share this stuff. And so, you know, this is a great platform for it. And I really do think that, you know, this is the right direction for sure. And you know, I didn't think you guys would really understand what I was talking about a lot of time, but, you know, and I'm, again, you can tell
Thanks,
I'm always
PJ.
very excited about this stuff too. Like, I'm very, very excited. So yeah, I just not, and I wasn't trying to down talk that by any means. I didn't mean it like that.
No,
It's just,
yeah.
as you can tell, when I'm excited, I just talk and talk and
Yeah,
talk, right?
I
So
get it, brother. I get
yeah,
it.
so yeah, I
You
appreciate
know,
it. And oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, I think, you know, I think it is important to start having these conversations too, right? Because it's especially about market making and trying to bridge out to other chains if that's something that DAO really needs to be doing, right? Because if you're looking at onboarding and player experience, like having access or being able to get, funds into the game is still one of the hardest things, right? To get crypto kind of into the game can still be very difficult. So,
Even for
it's hard to
Hive.
get Hive a lot of places. So
Yeah.
if this is something that like we need to start talking about this more, because this is, a DAO responsibility to increase access and liquidity to SPS. And this is something that's going to help, support the team's efforts to enhance the onboarding experience. Then, yeah, maybe this is a more urgent concern than we have been thinking about, because you could get a lot of people to come in, like the game, play it, but say, hey, this is a pain in the ass to try to, figure out how I'm going to get, money into Hive or into Hive Engine, or get, my crypto over here into the game. So yeah, I think that's something we definitely do need to start talking about more.
Yeah. But maybe more or less it's one of those things that really kind of brings Hive and Splinterlands to the table here. I surely think it would be, right. And I think those two community, I'd say they're probably two in the same to some extent as far as community goes, but the conversation is definitely not happening yet, and I think that's a good start, right? I think and again, as far as validators is concerned, like I'm really glad I have the vote of confidence so far in the community, and it doesn't go without saying, like I should be out here talking about these things more openly now, because it is kind of a position in the DAO as well. So I'm happy, and again, like I said, thank you very much for providing the opportunity. I don't even know how long we've been talking. It seems like the conversation's been only like 20 minutes, but I probably think you'd beg to differ. But yeah, I would love to be on and to talk about these things and give updates. I think it's really important. I'm not sure if my personality kind of bodes well with a lot of the community. I don't know. I guess I'll have to find out, right? But other than that, like I just can't thank these guys enough too at Splinterlands for really making this stuff possible. You guys are really having an investigator on here next week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, yeah, yeah. Man, that
Gator's
guy's
the shit, man. We had
Gator's
him
the
on.
shit, dude. Yes, he is.
Gator is the shit, man.
He
And
saves
he's
my
so
ass
cool.
all the time, man. He is awesome. You guys, he is the vice president of Splinterlands now, and we didn't publish a lot of this stuff. Like the vice president of engineering, right? He's the VP of engineering. He took over my job. And I thought he deserved this a long time ago, but if anybody, investigator is the one that I lean on the most out of anybody in the company, and not a lot of people know that. And we have this amazing infrastructure team. Like you don't have to, like their stuff just runs, but like he's actively touching everything in the code and just making sure that everything is working all the time. And I just can't, I can't give him enough credit. Like our infrastructure team is fucking amazing, but Investi just gets the brunt of it. I mean, he just deals with so much, and he's absolutely key to all of this. There's not a single person I could think more than him on the whole entire engineering team for what he's done and how good he does it.
Wow. Big praise, big praise. I thought you were going to yell at us and say he's got too much work to do. You can't be dragging him on here for a 2.5-hour conversation.
6 months ago, yes. Today, no. Now it's my ass is on the line, right? Which is fine, and it's okay. Like it's the validators thing is like, it's like we've been dealing with a lot of very, very hard things since I started. I think I started at like the peak down cycle, you know what I mean? Like where I started in 2022. So like I don't know the best of days for the most part. I've just been dealing with a lot of like hard times for the most, since I started. But I've loved every second of it. Like Matt and Nagy both have such separate talents that they're so good at. It's like you sit in the room, you listen to Aggie to talk, and it's like, I'll buy the knives, dude. I'll buy the base, I'll buy whatever you're selling. And then like, Matt on the other hand is like, when you sit down and understand where Matt's heart is and what he's trying to do, it's just so he's got so much thought and experience in this space too, that he's kind of like an old soul in a sense. He really is a very thoughtful person, and you can tell that he's extremely intelligent, right? Both of them are actually extremely intelligent. I think Aggie's a PhD in biochemistry or something like that, like crazy chemistry or something like
chemistry. Yeah.
Yeah, both of them are just extremely brilliant minds. And then you have to realize too, like at the time, at the heat of the market, people are telling you to 10x, 10x, 10x. And it's like even though you think you're dealing with like highly intelligent investors and people that are telling you what to do, that their incentives are not aligned with the things or the original goals of what happened. So it's easy to get dissuaded from or led onto the wrong things. And I think we experienced, I mean, all the gaming companies at some point have had the same similar issue, right? So we'll get through it. We're in it for the long haul, and hopefully everybody else is too. And hopefully we can all become much closer over time and realize who each other are. And like I said, I promise to make more public appearances here. But that's where our heads are at, and that's a long-term vision here. And I'm still very hopeful. Out of all the crypto projects that are out there, people still need to realize like we're big. Like, you've not compared to where we were before, understandable, but we're still big. We're really big. And that means a lot. It's just a lot of people don't respect that in a sense for what it is. And I'm looking at the dashboard every day. I see what's going on. Like, we're very aware, right? We're not dummies, right? And so like I said, it's important to get the communication out there, and this is a really important platform, and one of the platforms that seems like a great place to do it.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm curious, because you guys sound like, you've had, a bunch of successful careers, especially for your young age. And so yeah, man, like kind of with all that experience, like you just seem super bullish on Splinterlands, and you seem like you love working there, and you just seem so optimistic about it. Even like you said, even though you've been here, coming on board and taking over so much responsibility, as things have started to be on this downswing. So like, what, and I know you've probably said a lot of this stuff throughout, but like kind of like, what is it like? What is it that gives you the, that hope, that optimism, that like, yeah, this is going to be a successful, long-term project. We're turning the ship around, and, we're really, really headed in a good direction.
So I can go and look at how many people use Uniswap every day, right? I can go and look at the number of people that are using decentralized applications out there. And I realize that there's a lot of botting on the new, like, I challenge you guys to do something I told the Illuvium guys to do, right? Go look at Google searches in comparison to token prices for crypto games and look at the correlation, right? I don't give a shit about the pump and dump cycles, dude. It's all like, you guys, if you know crypto, it's all there, right? Yeah. I'm looking more of the long tail trajectory of things. And our crypto price is an inflationary token, which means it's just getting more of it in a downward cycle. So what's going to happen? The price is going to fall. It's easy to like, that's very apparent. Like, that should make sense to everybody, right? But go look at every base game and look at Google search queries and compare them to the token prices, and you'll see a direct correlation between Google activity and token price activity, right? Like, we have people that are sticking around through this. A lot of those games that we compare ourselves to, like, do you guys remember what was the big NFT one? I'm like I said, I'm terrible with names. It was like one of the big ones to raise like hundreds of millions of dollars, and then there was an NFT like space, kind of like Minecraft. What was the name of it? Sandbox, right?
Okay, yeah.
Raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and how many people were on there every day? Like 45, right? So, when I look at our stats, I'm like, oh shit, we don't got that problem. Like, fuck, could you imagine going to the board and trying to talk to them about, why you don't, you spent hundreds of millions of dollars hyping a project that has 45 users on it a day? Like, yeah, dude, this stuff is so hard. It's incredibly hard to build, right? And it takes a certain type of je ne sais quoi to do it. And these guys did it, and they gave me an opportunity to participate in it. And I've worked for big funds, and I hated it. Like, I can't imagine my life sitting in front of a OHLC chart all day long and trying to make bets just for the sake of $1, right? You guys, I mean, you guys are part of guilds, right? Yeah, take this fascinating thing, take this idea and try to run with it, right? I think guilds are the future versions of credit, like credit depositories, like banks, right? So like, think of younger generations, right? Are you guys familiar with like how what are they the kinds the God, like I said, I'm terrible with names, but a bank that's owned by a community, it's not a central, like a shareholder bank.
Yeah.
Credit union. Yeah, credit union, right? So like, I think guilds are like the younger generation's version of how a credit union will work, because they'll invest in things that they're familiar with. Rather than giving your money to a banker who is just going to take your money and use it to go make loans for some shitty housing market or some shitty real estate project that they did, right? People are going to invest in projects that they actually see the benefit of. You know what I mean? The easiest way to do that is in crypto. And so younger generations are going to get familiar with this idea of like, you know, they come together and they find something that they're interested in. They can go and make and build these markets and become incredibly valuable pretty fast, right? And if it works out for the long term. It becomes sustainable and it just continues to grow, right? But I think that's where, you know, to me, if I was and I'm 40 years old, so I'm not that young, right? But I think the younger generations and the people that I talk to, like that's their version of like investing and understand, because they can directly see the value of it and understand how what, you know, their investment is tying into things that are making their lives better. And if their life is playing games and their life is being around people that are in the guild, then I think we'll start to see the formation of these decentralized guilds that will act kind of like a credit union in a sense. But it's not in the sense that it makes no sense to us right now because that's not how we see the world, right? But younger generations will, and I like, damn, that's awesome. Like, who would have seen that coming? You know what I mean? So yeah, like again, when it comes to Splinterlands too, why I'm so optimistic, these problems are easy to solve, guys. They're not hard. Onboarding, fuck, that's easy, right? Tokens and creating markets on EVMs, like that's not hard. That's really, I mean, people do that every day, right? And then once you have these positive narratives, and once we're done with this backlog of stuff that we have to do, like it's all green pastures again. We can work on whatever we want to. You know what I mean? We're not held back by, you know, the 3 versions of land that have to come out that are just, you know, 100,000 line code bases that have to be maintained. Like we can scale down this stuff. We did it with our infrastructure. We're going to do it with validators. We ought to do it with our tokens. We ought to do it with Hive, you know, and have them on board too. And our payment providers. Like these are all easy, simple to achieve things that just need to happen that will sway the tides for us real easy. So yeah, maybe I'm again the eternal optimist. I've never thought of myself as being that way, but when you look at it on paper, that's not a lot. It's not that much, right? These are all like very achievable things. So maybe not a lot of people see that. Maybe people still think it's just, you know, crypto pump and dump scheme, but I think we've been around too long. And like I said, I'm very like, how many people get this opportunity in their life to do this? Not a lot, right? I enjoy every second of it. It's fun. It's really fun.
Awesome. Well, I don't know if we can end on a much better note than that, man. We you know, while you were kind of talking about your journey with Splinterlands, I was trying to map out timelines, and you know, you kind of pointed it out a little bit later in the conversation, but you've been around for, gosh, I guess almost 2 years at this point with
yeah, I started, yeah, right? I think March of 2022 is when I ran in whatever crypto in it, like NFTLA was. That's the first time I talked to Richard in 2022, Hardpoint.
Gotcha.
You know, so I had the fun, exciting times of working with Double Coconut in the mobile app. And, you know, our mobile app was built on like a completely separate code base. And we had all the other projects that were going on. So I got to take a line share of trying to help get a lot of these things started. So, but now my focus is strictly Splinterlands and obviously validators.
Cool. Well, man, I would love to see, you know, you called it out. It looks like the proposal for hiring Jupiter is going to pass with flying colors. It's sitting right around 87, 88%, something like that. Last I checked.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, there are some folks with the reservations, and you know, I think a lot of that it kind of boils down to maybe the lack of scope that was provided in the proposal, but
that's totally understandable too.
Sure. Yeah. And I think you did a good job to address some of that with the down hall. You've done a little bit further, you know, today here with us. But yeah, you know, I think the name of the game, man, I would love to see you get a little bit more involved with the community on a regular basis. And, you know, you're welcome to use us as a platform to do that. You know, I think Clay would offer the same platform with the down hall. And
Clay's on his own there, man. I'm not going in front of those guys. They're brutal.
Well, I'm sure you'll have some other content creators in the space kind of reaching out to take you up on that offer. And
yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I really hope so. And some of the whales too, like I know I've talked to a few of them. I haven't really talked to a lot of them. So if they're out there and they want to talk, like I'm pretty open book when it comes to this, and I'd really love to hear what people want to do that have spent a lot on this and figure out if it's conducive, right? So like I said, I'm pretty open book most of the time, and especially being a part of the DAO proposal now is going to give people more access. So I'm perfectly happy to do so. And I do a lot of public speaking. So I joke about it being a problem. It doesn't, I just try to focus on what I have to do. Like I have a boss, let's be real, right? So, when we originally started the conversation, I was a little worried and hesitant at first, but and one thing I will say though, you can't ask me too much about gameplay. Like I know how the mechanics of the game work. I know where all the data resides, right? But as far as if you're trying to ask me like Biz, oh my God, man. I had Biz was like my encyclopedia of just, hey, go ask Biz. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like Biz, yeah, dude. And God bless his soul because he saved my ass in conversations before. But I'm not the most technical in strategy of the game. That's not really my focus. So yeah, again, I really appreciate it. And I don't know if this is us ending on a high note, but again, thank you very much for having me and spending the time. It was great to get to know both of you guys. And I do look forward to having another conversation. Hopefully we can do some training and some market making and kind of kick this whole thing off. It'd be great.
Yeah.
Love it.
Awesome.
Yeah. PJ, you seem to be pretty active on Discord. I'm going to shoot you an invite. We got a People's Guild Discord with,
dope.
we've been kind of working through some proposals, just submitted the second from the People's Guild actually yesterday.
Right.
So yeah, there's some whales in there. There's some team members in there. We'll get you in there and, or at least extend the invite. I'll leave it up to you as to whether or not you pop in, but, as far as the nerves, man, duck in water, bro.
Yeah. All right.
Didn't pick up on any of that, dude. Yeah, you did provide us with the quote of the day, man, and I'm gonna work this into my steady vernacular moving forward. Is get high, go low, bro. I love it.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, there it is. All right, guys. Yeah, thank you very much, fellas, for having me. And again, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the future of this. And yeah, stay out. I mean, let's be optimists here. Like we know what we need to do. We know how to get there. So
cool. Thanks.
Beautiful.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy, so appreciate your time. Appreciate you being here.
all right, thank you.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next week with the VP of engineering. So check us out for conversation with Gator next week. But yeah, big thank you to you, PJ, taking the time to hop on. And yeah, we'll catch you guys later. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you guys.
Have been listening to
People's Guild.